just so that you know we are live right now.
Wonderful. Okay, so while we've got Trustee Cheen finding her way in, I am going to call our meeting to order. This first of our live sessions, public meetings in our education committee. So I will call this meeting to order. It is 7:03 and we have all trustees in attendance, save for Trustee Cheen, who will be joining us shortly. In attendance, what I mean by that, for everybody watching, is we are all in Microsoft Teams, and you can hear us verbally and or audibly, pardon me, and you can see most or some of us on your screen as well. You'll also be able to follow through with the presentations that are going on for anybody watching. So before we kind of start with the rest of it, if you'll indulge me here. So you recall at the start of our education committee this year that Trustee Olmsted, Superintendent Howitt, and I had decided that the theme of this year's education committee meetings would be challenge as opportunity. How apropos. And then in my first statements, I talked about how we'll all come up against challenges and how there are opportunities in the friction of that challenge. So to all parents and guardians out there worried about what's happening to your kids' school year, I have 3 daughters. I feel you. And I'm here to tell you that your kids, just along with mine, are learning right now in this time of navigating without a map. We are learning right now. This is deep learning. These are the skills, and this is the kind of humanity that we are drawing out of our GECDSB students. Caring for each other is exactly the work that we should be doing right now, and you're already doing it right now. So I thank my fellow trustees. I thank administration and staff. I thank all of our tireless educators and support staff out there in the system. I want to thank our students and their families for rising to this challenge, for inspiring me in all the ways that resiliency shows up in your life, and for taking care of each other. So if you'll, thank you for indulging me, we can start the meeting, and I'm going to start it with the land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We will go, so we're at C, approval of the agenda. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda. And for everybody watching at home, what's happening is in the chat, trustees are indicating support and moving in there. So I have support from Trustee Cook. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder from Trustee Leclerc. Thank you so much. All in favor?
Support.
Wonderful.
Support. Support.
Support.
Support.
Thank you.
Support.
Thank you very much. Trustees, do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder on approval of the minutes of the Education Committee meeting minutes from February 4th? So I've got approve from Trustee Cook and a second from Trustee Leclerc. Do we have any anything anyone wants to discuss about the minutes? Are we able to approve the minutes? Do we have support for approval of the minutes?
Support. Second.
Wonderful. Do we have, sorry, I'm not hearing Support from trustees.
Support.
Thank you.
Support.
Support. Support.
Thanks, everyone. Any business arising from the minutes? Hearing none. So we will move forward tonight with a presentation from Superintendent Armstrong on environmental stewardship. So anybody watching at home, you will see the presentation through on the screen, and you'll still be able to hear any questions that we have afterwards, and you'll be able to follow along with the actual presentation. So take it away, Superintendent Armstrong.
Thank you very much. Just waiting for it to pop up here on the screen. Good evening. I am pleased to have the opportunity to share with you information related to the board's environmental stewardship program. The board's Eco Schools program was established in 2003 and continues to make great strides in empowering staff and students to do the right thing for our planet. The Eco Schools Steering Committee has developed a vision to affect and sustain change in our school communities. Our vision is to create a culture that champions environmental stewardship and promotes best practices within our buildings and the community. I would like to recognize the efforts of Superintendent Howitt and Fuada Hamzy, Craig Guthrie, and Dana Simonovic from our programming department, who have been very instrumental in this initiative. I would also like to introduce Juliana Hinchliff, Manager of Facility Services, and Kathleen Quenville, our Energy and Environmental Officer, who will take you through the presentation. Next.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. Our focus during environmental stewardship is to create an eco-culture by supporting schools and influencing behaviors with information and curriculum opportunities related to energy conservation, waste minimization, and school ground greening, along with activities and challenges to further engage school communities and sustain the program. The board's program is based on Canada Eco Schools, which was initially developed by the Toronto District School Board and adopted provincially. The fundamentals of the program center around the creation of an eco team at each school, initial assessments in the 3 areas identified called eco reviews, with the development and implementation of action plans and initiatives to affect changes in the culture and the subsequent assessments. The board's Eco School program is supported by board policy, mandating the establishment of an eco team in each school, annual training, and regular challenges and initiatives throughout the year to continue to engage the school communities. Initiatives include and have included the Energy Challenge, Sweater Days, Water Conservation Month, and so on. The Eco School Steering Committee also publishes a quarterly newsletter highlighting ways to engage the school communities in environmental initiatives, along with highlighting various curriculum opportunities. Schools are encouraged to certify with Eco Schools, receiving either a platinum, gold, silver, or bronze status. At one point, over 2/3 of the schools were certified. In this previous school year, 33 schools received certification. Next. The board, along with the Eco School Steering Committee, has championed many initiatives to raise awareness about environmental issues and to build an eco culture within our schools. A key component for the sustainability of Eco Schools program is annual training and support for eco teams within our schools. In the past, the board supported an annual 1-day training workshop for eco team lead teachers, administrators, custodians, and 3 to 4 students for each school. In conjunction with the annual training day, Workshops targeting eco-team leaders were offered for professional development on various topics such as school ground greening or certification processes. In 2017-18, half-day workshops were provided for eco-team leaders from each school. At the end of 2018, the Eco School Steering Committee and the Program Department asked this question: is there a better way to support the environmental stewardship message and reach more of the school community? The new structure builds educator and student capacity, and instead of reaching a few people in each school, we are reaching hundreds from each school community. Next. In the fall of 2019, in conjunction with the program department, 2 instructors were seconded to develop a new training and delivery model for eco schools, as well as supporting the Fighting Island program. The delivery model in its first year is based on school assemblies and that are developed and delivered by the 2 instructors based on the pillars of eco schools and creating an eco culture. 2 grade-specific assemblies are planned for each elementary school and 1 assembly for each secondary school. After completion of the assemblies, the 2 instructors assist schools by meeting with the eco teams, hosting curriculum-specific activities to engage students, and assisting schools in promoting the Eco Schools program. This new initiative has seen 28 schools visited so far with great success and response. Next, please.
Here are some facts that we share about climate change and energy conservation. In Canada, 81% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the production of consumption of energy, including transportation, electricity, oil and gas, and heating and cooling. Most schools in our area and households depend on natural gas as their main heating fuel. The use of natural gas releases methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, contributing to global warming. The global average carbon dioxide is higher today than at any point in the past 800,000 years, and 48% higher than pre-industrial levels. Next. Here are actionable items that promote the creation of an eco-culture within the school and beyond. Schools have participated in an annual energy challenge where they're asked to develop plans and strategies aimed at saving electricity. They participated in the annual sweater day, where temperature set point in a building is reduced by 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Some schools have even asked for a sweater week or sweater month. Reminders are sent through Mr. Ribbit asking for eco teams to be aware of opportunities to reduce our carbon footprint. For example, dressing for the weather, closing curtains at night to keep that heat in, turning off computers and lights when not in use, and reducing the number of appliances in the school. Facility Services also works with the schools to ensure the heating and cooling set points are consistent throughout our school buildings and report any problems with heating or cooling so they can be fixed. Facility Services also continues to keep energy conservation at the forefront when designing any renovation or new construction by ensuring minimum energy efficiency standards are met and implemented. Facility Services also works with the schools to reduce the number of personal appliances such as microwaves, heaters, kettles, fans, and refrigerators. Next. In 2019, the Eco Schools Steering Committee piloted a new initiative around water conservation. It has designated May as Water Conservation Month and has supported this initiative with paid visits to the Essex Water Festival, tours of the water and sewage treatment facilities in the city and surrounding municipality. It's also provided facts about water as a resource, why conservation is so important, and how students can influence their households to save. Promotion of visits to schools by the Ontario Clean Water Agency mobile trailer, which also provides displays and activities that educate students on where water goes once it goes down the drain. Impact of excessive water use to our next. Here's some facts that we present to schools. Sorry, as the Donna and Craig, our instructors, present to schools why we should champion waste minimization. Over 90% of our waste actually goes into landfills, and landfills contribute 38% of Canada's methane emissions, which, as we mentioned before, it's a greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming. Methane may not linger as long as carbon dioxide, but it's 84 times as potent. About 25% of the human-caused global warming we're experiencing is caused by methane emissions. Next. Canadians are very dependent on single-use plastics. We throw away 3 billion plastic bags each year. We throw away 1 million plastic bottles a day. And we use 57 million straws a day. Unfortunately, less than 10% of all plastic is recycled. The other 90% goes into landfills or into our natural environment as litter. Globally, an equivalent of a garbage truck worth of plastic enters the ocean every minute. Next. Plastic can take hundreds of years to decompose into smaller pieces. Single-use plastic straws are among the top 10 items found during beach cleanups. But plastic never really disappears. When exposed to sunlight, waves, and wind, plastic breaks down into smaller pieces called microplastics, which are less than 5 millimeters large. With the longest coastline and 1/4 of the world's fresh water, we have a responsibility to support the Government of Canada's plan to implement a Canada-wide strategy on zero plastic waste. Humans inhale and ingest about 5 grams of plastic per week. That's the size of a credit card. People who meet the daily recommended water intake ingest 4,000 particles annually. Those who drink from bottled water ingest 90,000 particles of plastic. Many plastics, with the recycling codes 3, 6, and 7, contain dangerous chemicals such as phthalates, styrene, and bisphenols that can cause negative health effects. Next. So these are visuals that the environmental stewardship instructors, Donna and Craig, use with students to show the impact of plastics and microplastics on wildlife. Wildlife often mistake microplastics for food, and they consume them, causing blockages, leading to dehydration and starvation. Animals can get tangled up in the plastic bags and nets, and even plastic cap bottle rings, as you can see this fish on the right-hand bottom side. The impact, as you can see, is detrimental for some species, as they might be also endangered. Next. So here are some actionable items that promote the creation of an eco-culture within the school and beyond. Educate students on what single-use plastics are. They're made to be durable and to last forever, but are only used for 7 minutes or a few months, several minutes or a few months, and then become waste. We must inform students on the importance of eliminating single-use plastics for everyday use at schools, like plastic, straws, cutlery, plates, and bags, and also they can send that message home. Review proper recycling habits with all grade levels to decrease contamination and increase recycling rate in our municipality. We must explain wish cycling to staff and students. Wish cycling is a practice of tossing questionable items into the recycling bin in the hopes that they can be recycled. This is one of the biggest issues facing waste management today. It contributes to contamination because the one thing you tried to recycle is now causing tons of properly recycled items to get landfilled. In addition, some of the items can damage equipment at the recycling facility. We must stress the 5 R's, reduce, recycle, reuse, and now the additional rethink and refuse. Encourage the use of Recycle Coach app. And educate school communities about energy conservation and turning off unnecessary power users, shutting off lights whenever possible, and reducing appliances in schools. We should also promote active transportation and reduce idling of cars to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and affect climate change. We should also report water leaks and dripping faucets. Next.
The environmental stewardship instructors are able to monitor the effectiveness of the program through teacher surveys, focused interviews with students, and documented activities through Twitter posts. The second visit is a follow-up to monitor the impact of the assembly on the school culture and the next steps for the school. Next. The health of our students and of the human population is linked to the health of the world. It is possible to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, pollution, and the depletion of resources, but this requires a strong collective action. Waste reduction and energy conservation is not just an eco-team responsibility, but needs to be a whole school and community approach to sustainability. We are able to reach more students and staff to discuss these topics by visiting each school versus the one-day eco presentation for eco teams only. Educating students on the present environmental state and actions we can take builds resilience and optimism. Simply providing information does not improve outcomes, but a more active involvement by all learners promote change. We encourage active involvement of all learners to promote change by asking students, staff, classrooms, and entire school body to make environmental pledges. Next.
In November 2019, the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee was formed. This multidisciplinary committee includes representatives of purchasing, facility services, the program department, trustees, GETPIC, and supervisory officers. We have had presentations from our environmental stewardship program consultants and the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority. The committee appreciates the broad scope of its work, and it has been examining ways to reduce or eliminate single-use plastics in all board facilities, including education programs, looking at our vendors for green clauses and contracts, examining the contents of vending machines in our secondary schools, examining the contents in our programming kits, and examining our purchasing activities, including taking on a plastics inventory of our supplies. Our last meeting was on March the 12th, and our work has temporarily been paused during the school closure period, but we look forward to resuming our work. Next.
Here are some of the impacts that the environmental stewardship assemblies have been having across the board. Next. So these images show examples of what students produced immediately after the presentations. They came back to show us the messaging they had produced after learning from the assembly. So here one school pledges to give up plastic straws, and they're providing their students with reusable straws. Next. And here are images from another school pledging to use refillable water bottles. Next. So, and here are students' quotes after they've been surveyed after the assemblies. The first one, the presentation has helped me gain better understanding of environmental issues. It's very important to make Ontario schools more sustainable. Eliminating single-use plastics in schools is the first step towards eco-consciousness at home. Being a member of the eco team, I urged my family to stop bringing plastic water bottles to soccer games. We now each have a reusable water bottle. And we shouldn't use plastic straws because they are TKs. TKs are turtle killers. Next.
As an Eco Schools Steering Committee, we'd like to use the data we gather from monitoring activities to address areas of need and gaps in the support systems for our schools and school communities. We would like to reimagine the Eco Schools program so that schools, and we can ensure schools, are able to do and complete the basics. We want to develop a vehicle to share best practices between schools, which are plenty. We want to develop a recognition program outside of eco-school certification. We'd like to continue to support schools through this new model of training and support. And we'd like to provide regular initiatives and curriculum connections to ensure sustainability of the program. Next. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to sustain a board-wide culture of environmental stewardship that focuses on practices that support confident learners, engaged communities, and ethical stewardship. I thank you for your time and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong, and that dream team there. Thank you so much. So we're going to get into questions from trustees. Before we start that, I want to remind everyone once more, just as in the boardroom, we can keep our mics off until we're called upon, and then we'll turn our mics back on. It just reduces some of the feedback for people when they are listening, just as we all are sitting in our homes. So I have a question. So I have in order right now, and I will keep an eye on the rest of the questions. Right now I have Trustee Hatfield. And then Trustee Sipcard will follow that up, and then I'll continue calling. So Trustee Hatfield, go ahead. Are you muted, Trustee Hatfield? Trustee Hatfield says her cursor is frozen. Trustee Hatfield, if it's all right with you, I'm going to move on to Trustee Sipcar, and then we'll pause after that. I will check back in with you to see if we can catch up with your question at that point. So I've got Trustee Sipcar is next, and then we'll come back to Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just have a couple questions. Thank you for the wonderful overview of the presentation of everything that our school board is doing in terms of environmental stewardship. I did have a question. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the change that has happened. I was actually a part of eco schools, I think, when it started when I was in high school, like 15 years ago or so. And so from my understanding, you need a champion at the teacher level or at the staff level. And I noted at the beginning of the presentation, you said that there were 33 schools certified, but that you were moving to a different system so that you could, or I guess a different kind of process so that you can engage more students. I just wondered if you could articulate that a little bit more. Are you insisting that there is a staff member at each school, or one, or I think I heard two, and if so, how are you reaching beyond just the handful or, you know, odd students who want to be part of the Eco Schools team?
Okay, I'll ask Julia Hinchcliffe, please, to answer that question.
Yes, thank you very much, Trustee Sipcar. The Eco Schools program, when we initially started 12 plus years ago, was premised on a eco team, which contained an administrator, a teacher, a custodian, students, and even parent involvement. Over the years, that structure has morphed into various other structures in schools. We now look
Unknown participant is now joining.
Sorry. We now look for some involvement at a school level. There are some schools that cannot find a teacher to support the Eco Schools program, and therefore the administrator of the building, whose time is precious, must champion that cause. So we continue to encourage that structure, but sometimes that is difficult in some schools. Other schools, the eco teacher is the biggest champion and has long-standing initiatives that have been going on, and I reference like Leamington High School is a perfect example where they are the they're lead.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
They're actually platinum certified, so they're an excellent program, and we are hoping that through some reimagining of the Eco Schools program, we can provide enough support to schools to get them to a level that we define what we minimally need in those schools in order to support the Eco Schools program. In terms of certification, we don't require schools to certify. The way we are reaching others, as many students as possible, is through this program change that we have done. The 2 environmental stewardship instructors now are reaching every student in the school, which is something we've never had the opportunity to do. And thanks to our partnership with the program department, it has been a huge success in affecting change at that level, because we are there supporting the school and the school administration and whatever teacher wants to be involved at that level. It's been a bit of a challenge this year with some labor issues and, of course, this pandemic, but we are actually getting much deeper into the school culture than we've ever done before. Also, in terms of certification, the messaging that we've been hearing back from long-time schools that have certified for years is that it's a very hard and strenuous process. And Eco Schools, which used to be a very regional group, then went to Eco Schools Ontario, and now is at Eco Schools Canada. So there's little, if any, recognition at a school level anymore. It's basically, but they have recently streamlined their certification process. So it's something that we want to recognize the schools and ones that participated and do such good work. And we're just trying to figure out if Eco School certification is the absolute right process.
Trustee Sidbar, did you have a supplementary question?
I did, yes. That was going to be my follow-up question, was what Mrs. Hinchcliffe touched on, which was, you mentioned that there was going to be new recognition outside of the certification. And I just wondered, has that been already developed? And is that kind of like, and from my understanding from what you just said, is that kind of like a more entry level for schools who don't have the, let's say, the staff champion or, you know, strong interest from the student body? It's maybe a more palatable way to kind of work your way towards certification?
Yeah, it hasn't been developed yet. We just recognize that we've seen decreases in schools certifying because, for lack of a better word, there's very little bang for the buck. There's a lot of work involved, and especially by the champion at the school, and all they get back is a certificate, a little sticker to put, you know, a gold sticker. And so it really could be a much more impactful for locally for our school board. We used to have a program several years back called Leaping Forward, which was supplemental to the certification program. And we actually rewarded schools who went above and beyond through that and had recognition. And we need to do it a little bit differently, only because we don't have the training day anymore. And we want schools to be recognized because there's such good best practices out there and such great schools that we really want to recognize them for their efforts.
Thank you very much. Trustee Hatfield, do we have you back?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
Thank you. So our school board has always had a very, I think, proud track record in dealing with the whole topic of environmental stewardship. And I do remember the Leaping Forward program. And I do remember all the swag that we had at the time and the many ways that we had of recognizing our schools. Not to say that our Eco Schools programs weren't as impressive, but it's all been, I think, very proud achievements of our board. But my question has to do with the here and now. And I was hoping that we might hear how we're tackling the topic of environmental stewardship in our classroom learning of today, because my concern would be that if we're not back into our school buildings maybe until September. Who knows? Nobody knows. I want to know if we're going to be losing a lot of the momentum from March until, September or whenever. I mean, it's still several months of classroom learning. And so what I would have liked to hear tonight was more about the here and now and how we're engaging students in environmental stewardship learning, because I think that it's something that could easily fall off the shelf. And, there are a lot of things that kids could be doing at home. They could be transferring the models of what they're learning in classrooms to their own homes, like turning off lights and doing many things to preserve precious resources. And so that's what I would have liked to have heard tonight. And I'm wondering if there's anything you can tell me about present day and how we're engaging students in learning about environmental stewardship.
Thank you for that question. That's a good question, and obviously it's a challenge that we are facing to some extent because of the way our learning has changed right now due to the closure. I do know that we have been sending out Earth Day items. They were sent out to our students this week, and a lot of schools are including these types of activities in their announcements as part of the school day that's occurring, I guess, remotely, for lack of a better word. And we are encouraging those students to do those activities at home.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask that when administration answers the question, I can see here on my screen who's speaking, but perhaps if people are just listening, if you could just announce who it is that's answering the question when we have those, just so it's easier for people that are following along. Trustee Burgess, did you have a question?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Yes, I do. I wondered what our progress was as far as installing water bottle filling stations. And I did have another question about, because I'm trying to understand the new model. So that's my first question.
This is Superintendent Armstrong. I'd like to refer the question to Juliana Hinchliffe.
Thank you. This is Juliana. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. One of the things that we've been doing when the first water bottle filling station was piloted by Walkerville, like 5 or 6 years ago, we've morphed the whole water bottle filling station process into more of an automatic automatic replacement. We've upgraded in 12 to 15 schools the domestic water system in the schools, and part of that upgrade included the replacement of every water fountain with a water bottle filling station. We currently have 99 water bottle filling stations installed throughout our system, both elementary and secondary. However, when we go in and start doing some of these replacements, because schools were designed at a time when water drinking fountains were installed every 20 feet, it's a little bit easier, and especially with the lead in drinking water flushing programs, it's a little bit easier for us to strategically place both water bottle filling stations that also come with drinking fountains attached to them. So we work with the principal in the schools. We get confirmation as to, or agreement on where we're placing the water bottle filling stations. We try to remove as many drinking fountains that are old and antiquated as we can. And we put those water bottle filling stations on our drinking water flushing program. We try to strategically place, if schools just want 1 or 2, we try to strategically place them by gyms and washrooms as a general rule.
So,
oh, sorry. Did you have that follow-up question? Yeah.
Well, just even on this though, so I heard 99. Does that mean that every school has at least one?
Yes. As far as I know, yes. If we haven't gotten to them, we will get to them. Most of the time when a school wants a water bottle filling station, we go through our building alteration process. But I'm pretty sure if not, we will get to them in the very near future. So.
I would think the exception would be Peely Island.
Oh, yes. Yes, that would be a good one.
They have their own big one, but I think they have to pay for the water. I'm just wondering. So my other question, if I could, Madam Chair, or should I wait?
Is this a supplementary to that one? I can put you back in the queue if you have a separate one. I'll put you back in the queue. Yep, I'll call you on you. Right now we have Trustee Halberstadt who has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to get clear what's happening with the certification process. Is it being phased out, or are schools still able to apply for it? I know it sounds like it's very laborious, and I think the new system is better, but does that preclude schools still getting the certificates from the ECHO certificates from I guess it's the Canada-wide program now. They did a presentation in Halifax when I was down at the annual meeting a couple of years ago, but are they still in the game, or are they totally being phased out?
This is Superintendent Armstrong, and I'll ask Ms. Hinchliffe to please answer the question.
Thank you very much. With the phasing to Eco Schools Canada, they have now imposed a board membership fee, which never existed before, and which is about $2,000, a little over $2,000. And if boards choose not to join, each school who wants to certify now has to pay $100. We have for the next year until we formalize a replacement for certification. We have registered the board with Eco Schools Canada. We certainly are not stopping people or stopping schools from certifying. They are more than welcome to do so. Again, as Eco Schools Canada streamlines and makes the certification process less laborious, maybe more intuitive, I think we will revisit it to see if it aligns with any interest in our schools to go through that process. It is a great measuring tool and a great way to monitor participation. So it is still being evaluated. We certainly are not stopping our schools from doing that, but we are also looking at other schools, and because the level of participation is from nothing to the best, there's a lot of various levels, and we want to make sure that every school can participate in some way in the environmental stewardship programs.
Okay, thank you. I do have a supplementary.
Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, with regard to the multidisciplinary committee, which I'm a member of, I know we've had about 3 meetings before the strike started, and then now the pandemic. And I know Superintendent Armstrong said it's on pause, but I'm just wondering, is admin given any thought to when we can come back with this committee? These figures are really staggering. So certainly we're not going to have a great impact, but we want our schools to be the best. But when we see that plastic straws has a life cycle of 200 years, and 6 packs of plastic rings have 400 years lifespan. So anyway, yeah, I'm anxious to get back at it, and I know it's not ideal, but is there a timeline that you're looking at with regard to starting up the committee again?
Hi, it's Superintendent Armstrong. Thank you for the question. I do agree. We seem to be making a lot of great headway on the initiative, and it has been a little bit difficult having to stop. We've paused it only because I think there's so much work I think that's been involved with the distance learning and getting everyone up to speed from that perspective. So I know from my own end, I've been a little bit sensitive about the extra ask on staff at this time with respect to it. But I'm hopeful we might be able to try and do something perhaps towards the end of the month to restart our progress related to that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So I do have the next round of questions from people who have already asked a question. So I'm going to give one last shout out to anybody who's looking for their first question. A few seconds here if somebody wants to ask a first question. Not seeing anybody, we'll go back. I've got Trustee Sipcar and Trustee Burgess with a second question each. So Trustee Sipcar, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just wanted to ask administration about the slide that specifically dealt with actionable challenges. And I just took note of everything. And I had a couple of questions or wondering if these things are maybe missing. The first one is I wondered about community gardens. I know that a number of schools have them, and that there is a number of parents and community advocates and groups that have wanted more community gardens, both for growing produce, but also for growing even just a pollinator garden with wildflowers and things like that. Just wondering if that falls under the Eco Schools umbrella. And then the second part of that question for actionable challenges is what kind of encouragement, or I don't know if it's curriculum, do we have around advocating for policy changes at different levels of government? So I know that, for example, there was the Climate Action Forum that happened this past March that was for high school age students that was put on by a team from the university. And there was a number of sessions related to how to advocate for better environmental and climate change policies. And I think this past year, we've really seen an increase across the world with high school students, our youth getting involved in these kind of these movements. And I wonder what our school board is doing to encourage those discussions, encourage that type of good civic engagement from our students, and wondering if that is factored into the actionable challenge list as well. So sorry, that was a two-part question.
Okay, this is Superintendent Armstrong. Juliana Hinchliff, are you able to answer the questions from Trustee Sipcar?
I think I can answer number one. So I'll start with that one. The Eco Schools program has a robust school ground greening application process that talks about schools that want to plant trees, develop outdoor schoolyards, and plant wildflowers, etc. Because one of the challenges that we've had with school ground greening is it's all a lot of fun to do when you put it in, but then sustainability and longevity of the product is sometimes is not thought through. So we've got a very formal, robust program that's run through our building alteration form and through our operations department, who has vast experience on that. The one or two times that we've dealt with community gardens has not been successful or very successful. We do not encourage them because, and not so much community gardens. A lot of schools want to plant a garden, which I think is an awesome idea. However, when staff and students are gone all through July and August, it makes it a real challenge to sustain it. And unless there's a champion, we find that they're not really successful. We haven't had a lot of asks either. And a lot of times I think they just do them. And if they work, great. If they don't, they don't. And we've had several requests where people have said, you know, this was started, it was not a good idea, can you take it out? There's also a lot, and I'd have to refer to Superintendent Pike for this one, but I think the Board of Health has some requirements too, like when our students are growing and then eating the vegetables. I think there's a little bit of a health component there. I'm not 100% sure. So we haven't had a lot of requests for that, and we don't go out asking for it. And that's question of part one, and I really am going to struggle to answer part two.
Okay, this is Superintendent Armstrong. I might struggle a little bit with your second question. I think that right now, the majority of the work right now that we're focusing on is making changes in the school and educating our students and hopefully making an impact on families in terms of actionable challenges, positive changes towards the environment. Potentially that could be an action that may result from some of the work that we do as part of the Single-Use Plastics Reduction Committee. And perhaps Superintendent Howitt might be able to share a little bit more information that might support the answer to your question.
Thank you. This is Superintendent Clara Howitt. We do have documents within the province from the ministry that provide a scope and sequence of expectations around environmental education. In fact, there's one that's just been developed just recently, and other supporting documents. So there is a thread within that within those support documents that support advocacy among students, which also aligns to the 21st century competencies that we want to build in all of our students, one of which is that of good citizenship and being responsible to your community locally and globally, and that would include what we do to support the environmental footprint that we leave on the world.
Trustee Sigmar, did you have a supplementary question to that?
Yes, I do. On the community garden one, I wonder if this is something that we could explore in terms of making community gardens potentially more accessible and easier to administer. I've been involved in community gardens through an organization, and I completely understand that there's a lot of excitement in the spring, and then it gets really hot in the summer and you go away on vacation and you forget to keep watering your bed and it gets overrun with weeds. And I could imagine that on school grounds, that's what happens. I wonder if there could be something that rather than it being no, we don't encourage them, we could say this is what it would take to have a garden, which means a commitment throughout the summer from whether it's students or a parent to be able to access the garden in order to continue it. It's just an idea, but I just think that it aligns so closely with environmental stewardship. And I think especially right now in the age of COVID, and I've noticed a lot of families turning to gardening during this time because A, they have time, and B, it's a more, secure route for food. It's a little bit, but they can grow their own produce. And so I think I'm just wondering if there are ways that maybe under this umbrella of environmental stewardship, if we could encourage it, this type of behavior. And I just want to thank, Superintendent Howitt for the question about the curriculum on the advocacy piece as well. So, but yeah, that was just going to be my supplementary question / comment.
This is Superintendent Armstrong. I would like to ask Superintendent Howitt to answer your question.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. In fact, what Juliana referred to was in fact what we did when it came to gardens that were starting to pop up across the system, because like you indicated, Trustee Sibkar, there are implications with hosting a garden within the community. What has changed from that is in fact a de facto policy bubbling up from what was happening in our schools because there was an interest from students and the community for gardens. So we do in fact have a policy in place to support community gardens so that there are rules and processes that we follow for the safety of our students, the safety of members within the community that may harvest from those gardens. But in fact, it's become part of the learning process to support learning with our students from an environmental perspective and from an inquiry perspective. So it's really rather recent that policy was developed, but it's basically a de facto policy because there was interest within schools and they were starting to really pop up. And we needed to have some processes in place to ensure there was safety for everyone.
Thank you. I've got Trustee Burgess with her second question.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So I'm just still trying to figure out what the new model is post eco schools within, another year or so. I've been here, of course, through the whole evolution of eco schools, big champion of eco schools, love eco schools. Always celebrated when anybody got bronze, silver, gold, or heaven forbid, platinum. And we've seen schools at all those levels. I also really loved the full day presentations we had. And I think the bonus of those was the variety of workshops, but mostly the bonding of the eco team, because it was diverse, because the students were chosen who were eco leaders from each school, with the custodian, custodial staff, somebody from custodial staff, teaching or non-teaching lead, as well as administration. They brought that back to the school. And of course, if we looked across the province of our participation in eco schools, in comparison to other boards, we've had a very high participation in eco schools. So I always looked at that as great, even though we might not have had 100% achieving a certain level. We had a high participation. You also had opportunity in those one-day things to have really strong keynote speakers, opportunity for kids to be exposed to, world-class speakers, etc. And I can see where we would want to make our own model. I'm thinking sort of like we don't have to have a lead status on the construction of a school, but we can take the same principles and make it our own, and put those sustainable features into the architecture of the built environment. Same thing with our version of eco schools. But could you please clarify, like, I want, I guess, some assurance that over this next year, as we go through and develop our own, that it's going to be templated and really try to keep that that team, like I think the formation of an eco team in every school it may be a challenge, but we have to have some champions. And I think I'm a little afraid if we default to something so low of a standard that the kids won't see the cohesive nature of what that team approach and the goals of eco goals every year and trying to achieve it. Maybe not competitive, but it's something to do with the whole school ethos. So will it be templated? I want to say thank you for the encouragement on community gardens. I support them. I'm hoping there is some recognition. Prior to, we have actively discouraged them, but I'm hoping there's some opportunity to see those implemented in a good way. But I also heard the scope and sequence, etc. I'm wondering if anything from the old Bondar report that came into became the criteria that eco schools was founded on, how we're implementing that into this new program. So I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. I want to keep as much as we can from eco schools rather than just an assembly.
Thank you for that. This is Superintendent Armstrong. Our intention with our model really is to continue to promote and support eco schools and to really reignite that program. We do continue to have eco school champions in our schools. And perhaps to provide further clarity to your question, I will ask Ms. Hinchliffe to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. Thank you for the question, Trustee Burgess. Right now, the eco schools structure is fully supported by our policy, and I don't envision that changing. I envision some nuances changing in what eco teams minimally have to do. Right now, in terms of the policy, schools are required to have eco teams. Schools are required to do various things to support environmental stewardship in the curriculum, but they don't. It's a little bit of a gap I see in terms of providing school direction on some of the minimum activities that a school should celebrate and should complete, and we should recognize, such as an energy conservation program, such as a proper recycling program as required by legislation, and just some basic things that school teams can latch on to and implement and say it's a success. So the structure of the eco team, I don't envision changing. I also envision that the structure of the training through assemblies is reaching such a larger, bigger audience that I think it is having a much bigger impact on our school communities than even the one-day workshop. Even though I enjoyed them, it ignited the fire, but didn't penetrate deeply into the school community as well as these assemblies are doing. And it's not just an assembly. They're in the school, they're going through curriculum pieces with the children, they're talking to the staff and the eco teacher, and they're providing that support to those schools directly in their buildings, which has been just monumentous in encouraging and promoting eco schools throughout our system.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking for any last questions. If I don't see any, I have one. And it's kind of piggybacking a little bit off of Trustee Hatfield's question about what we're doing kind of in this time. And I'm looking at the second last slide in the slideshow here. And we have this using our next steps to use data monitoring from to address areas of needs or gaps in support systems for schools, and also developing a vehicle to share best practices between schools, and developing a recognition system outside of eco-school certification. And while we're in this kind of global pandemic that we're dealing with, we're also in a climate emergency. And I like to thank Trustee Hatfield for bringing it back to kind of the education that we're providing to our students here. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can use the things that are going on, or really that are not going on in our school buildings right now, as the data that we're able to gather before using these monitoring systems, and the data that we're able to gather now with nobody in the buildings, and trying to think of ways that we can pull that into the curriculum to talk about the human impact of what happens in these buildings, and bring it back to kind of connect the school community in that kind of way, all of our different sites, and to bring it back down to to kind of a learning opportunity for students. I'm wondering if am I right in that we can still gather that kind of data from these monitoring systems, or am I way off base?
Hi, this is Superintendent Armstrong. I'm going to refer your question to Ms. Hinchliff. You do raise an excellent point. I think it's a great learning moment and teachable moment to show what the impact was from the changes that we've been required to adopt as a result of the pandemic. And I'll refer to Ms. Hinchliff in terms of the ability for measurement and data of information.
Thank you. In terms of the slide you're referring to, when we talk about monitoring activities, we're actually talking about the surveys and the questionnaires done by students by our environmental stewardship instructors. They were tasked this year, when they started September, to monitor where eco schools environmental stewardship programs were in each of the buildings. So what are they doing? What's been working? What hasn't been working? Do they have an eco team? Have they been successful in implementing anything? And they've been gathering a lot of data in terms of the success and the penetration of the program, and in the how well it's adopted in the schools. And that's the information we've been using to inform our next decisions in terms of that. In terms of schools themselves, this has obviously been, from a utility consumption point of view, a unfortunately great 2 months, because we've had no activities in schools. Which is not a good thing. But I mean, if that's the bottom line, then yes, it's been very successful. But in the end, we want to be able to support schools, and that's what we're using the monitoring data to help us inform the decision. What do we mean that the schools don't have an eco team, for example? What do we need to do to them, for them, to be able to allow them the ability to have a program and to sustain that program? Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was hoping that some of those things were able to monitor kind of the human impact of what was happening in our schools, and that we could use that. But maybe that's something we can kind of conceptually do to kind of bring this pandemic piece home to kind of a school community, and thinking about what they do within their actual school building when they do eventually get back to it, which I hope is soon. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. So I don't see any more questions here from trustees. Thank you very much for that presentation. That was wonderful, very informative. I really appreciate that. And we do not have, moving through the agenda, we don't have any delegations. Am I correct in saying we do not have anyone on the speakers list as well?
Correct.
Thank you, Emma Buff. I appreciate that. We don't have anything at new business. No reports to be received. So we are at L, and this is trustee question period. So do any trustees have questions for trustee question period? I see Trustee Olmsted and then Trustee Burgess. So Trustee Olmsted, and then I do see Student Trustee Jane as well. So we'll start with Trustee Olmsted, and then I'll call on the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? My mic's been, it's been really bad connection for me on my end. So is everyone able to hear me?
I can hear you great.
Okay, perfect. I've received many calls and emails from parents and guardians over the past few weeks. They're really overwhelmed by this entire situation, the pandemic, the quarantine, working from home, job loss, financial hardships, and now the online remote learning. And the resources have been great, and they've said that, but they are literally at their breaking point, and they are entirely overwhelmed by this situation. So many are facing unprecedented hardships and obstacles and have the added stress now of educating their children at home. So my question is kind of twofold. How are we as a board addressing the mental well-being of both the students and the families in the Greater Essex County District School Board? And have we communicated the expectations being placed on parents throughout this pandemic in terms of educating their children online? Because I know so many are feeling overwhelmed. They feel like they're failing their students or their children. They feel like they cannot take the place of their teachers, which they don't want to take the place of, but they just feel as though they're not adequately educating their children. And they're so worried their children are going to fall behind. So have we communicated these expectations publicly? I haven't seen them. And what are we doing to really address the mental well-being of both our students and the families who are educating them?
It's Director Kelly here. If it's okay if I answer part of that question, I'm sure some of my colleagues would also have things to add. With respect to the mental well-being, we're very aware how challenging this is for parents, and I know certainly we had a GECDSB meeting the other night, and those sentiments were certainly expressed. It is very difficult to do all that and balance on that. There are no teaching police out there making sure everything's happening in the homes, that all the work's completed or anything like that. So I think parents need to understand this is emergency learning, this is distance learning, and that we are doing our best, all of us together. And we have done a survey actually with parents that I know Superintendent Hillman has been gathering information on, and I know that today he mentioned some of the themes and such that he's seeing, and I could ask him to speak to that after. But in terms of the expectations, we want students to engage in the learning, but we understand the very, very stressed environment that we've placed students in. We do have, in the area of mental well-being, we do have podcasts and information there, but we will continue to message, particularly when we get the parent survey results. We will certainly bring back that information because we want to hear what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what's stressful for them, what's working. All of those pieces. So we will message that out. But I think it is an important message for parents to understand this is not teaching just like it normally was, and it's going to all happen. This is distant remote learning, people doing their best together, and that we can't expect everybody to be the math teacher, the English teacher. We just can't expect that. I ask if Superintendent Hillman, you may want to comment on that, because I think some of the survey results, and I know you still have them, and you're looking through some of those results, maybe you have some themes or ideas that you've been able to pick up, because I know you got quite a turnout in the survey.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, the results are impressive and rich and overwhelming. We're at about 2,500 responses from parents already, so I'm really pleased with that. It's going to create a significant amount of work in terms of data analysis, but I think it's really important and really critical work. So one of the things that's becoming apparent is that this looks different through the lives of our families, that however you're experiencing school closure and the broader COVID pandemic, it's mediated through your family, what that looks like, what the structure is, what challenges you're facing, what strengths you have. So what we're trying to make sure we see is the diversity of that. We have families who are having significant struggles with technology, skill and capacity of adults, connectivity, etc. We have other families who are thriving because of the technology. Stories of students with special education needs who have found this to be an incredible experience. And then the family next to them, it's something different. So what's clear is it's different for all of our families. I think our work right now is to try to make sure we understand the totality of that, the comprehensiveness of that, so that we can plan for it. To echo the point in terms of a conversation we had at GECPIC last week, is just reinforcing for parents that this is, hopefully a once in a lifetime experience. We're all in a scenario where we're trying to be safe and we're trying to be well, and we're trying to be hopeful and optimistic. And if we can get our math done along the way and our social studies, that's really good. But there's certainly, from my perspective, no expectation that the regular school day of 6 or 8 periods run like clockwork could be replicated at home. That certainly isn't my expectation. I know not ours on behalf of the board. As we move forward and we see these challenges, we're going to prepare for them. But I'm confident that the mental health work that's been produced and is being shared through Dr. Pike's office is helpful. It will continue to find ways to make that as public as possible. And I look forward to bringing back information and a really complex and deep analysis from our parents about what they're valuing, what challenges they continue to see. And we've asked them specifically to explain the kinds of areas in which our help can be of great assistance to them. So I'll be in a position in a few weeks to be able to share that information if that's requested.
Thank you. Superintendent Pike, did you want to chime in on the mental health question from Trustee Olmsted?
Thank you. This is Superintendent Pike, and I've got student wellbeing in my portfolio. We have got and put together pretty quickly web pages on our website to help parents, families, staff, students navigate through the COVID-19. We had, and we continue to have a survey up there for kids to let us know what they're worried about and what they're concerned about, what makes them happy, so that we're able to provide resources that are kid-friendly in some cases, and in other cases for adults, and understanding what's happening and how to react and what happens at home, all of those kinds of huge, big, broad ideas of anxiety and depression, routines, and all those kinds of things. Those are actually done in podcasts. And then we have the script beside them now. We also have print resources. We have kid information sheets, which are really targeting what the kids are asking us and what questions they have in their surveys and making sure we respond for that. Just to let you know too that our social workers continue to see the students that are on their case lists. Of course, they don't see them face to face, but they do see them or actually speak to them. And they're working with the students that they've currently got on their case list, and they've gone to their waiting list students as well. But we do have a robust referral system, which has been transformed because we are working virtually, so that people meaning staff and principal are able to refer students. On the web pages as well, we do have a full listing of other resources, community resources such as food banks, financial assistance, and I'm just at the top of my head, those are the two that come right away, but there are other resources that are on there. When we know that people need something, very much what I'm hearing from Superintendent Hillman as well, is that we'll be responding for that. We are here for kids and we're here for families, but we're not in this alone. We've got our community partners who certainly want to partner with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Olmsted. Do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, I do. And I really thank you for the answer that you've given tonight, and as well as the work that has been put into this. I truly appreciate the work that the director and the senior team has done. As I have children on the board and a husband who's a teacher and a sister who's a teacher, I really value the tremendous effort being put out by all of the educators, by the senior team, by the community as a whole. My issue is if parents aren't aware that these resources exist, and so many aren't. I've never been contacted as much as I have over the last 4 weeks by community members. If they're not aware these resources exist, then they're not accessing them. So is there a way to put them out there more into the public? I realize that they're on the webpage, on the board page, and that's great if parents are able to navigate the board page. But is there a way to reach the community better? I don't know whether it be through interviews or through the media or sharing more on social media, but it's really futile to have these amazing resources out there if no one's accessing them. And the parents that I've spoken with, they're so overwhelmed with their day-to-day living and the hardships that they're facing. Many are frontline workers, that they're just not going on the board webpage. It's not even in their thoughts. And they've reached out to me, maybe because it's a small town and they know me, but it is, they're at their breaking point. And I've directed them to the board site and they are accessing it, but only after being prompted. So my question is, like, how do we get it out there? This is such a difficult time for so many families, and I appreciate the survey, and I appreciate everything that's being done, but just parents are literally at their breaking point. So can we get this out there more, communicate it better, that we have this wealth of resources and we want people to tap into them? I don't know. Is there anyone that can answer that?
I can perhaps start to answer that, Trustee Olmsted, if that's okay. It's Director Kelly. Yeah, I appreciate your point is that not everybody has, for example, the technology to be able to access the excellent resources. We have sent many packages out from a print perspective, and sometimes that helps. And we've also sent a lot out to our Indigenous community. And again, sometimes that helps. We've also sent out school supplies. If you have other suggestions of ways we could communicate, we do use a lot of social media. We do try to certainly retweet, and we're in the process now of looking at a little bit of an organizer that we could communicate with parents but again, that's electronic. So if you have suggestions, we have done some translation to certain communities by Center Voice. But we welcome any suggestions at ways that we're reaching. And if we're not reaching people, they should be contacting teachers, though, too. That's another thing that I think we haven't messaged enough. If there is something that you're missing or you feel that you need, the teacher is, on the resource for that as well, and also the principal. I think those are two things we should mention more. But if you have any suggestions, we're certainly open to them. As you know, this has been sort of education as we're learning to deliver this in a manner that we haven't. And so if we take the suggestions of others, and I think our parent survey will help us, but so we're open to hearing different ways of communicating.
If I can speak to that, I can say that the message in Low German that was sent out in the Leamington area was very appreciated by the families. I did hear from a number of students and staff about that. There is that language barrier, and that did, kind of bridge that a little bit about the access to technology and the online learning. But I don't know if there's ways that we can access through media, like through radio or television or some other messaging, or have the principals perhaps or teachers send out emails through EDSB, just making parents aware that these amazing resources are out there, because I think once they have access to them, it does help them a lot. I mean, I have spoken with many, and I do always tell them to refer back to their principal or their teachers, because that is their point of contact. But just, so many are overwhelmed. They don't know what to do.
It's Dr. Kelly, if I could again, thank you for that. I think you've posed a challenge for us to at the senior team to think about ways that we can message to different communities, and to do so on a repeated basis so that we're not missing people. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we all have a lot to say on that, but I will move on through the questions. We have quite a list here. Trustees, I'm getting all of your names. I'm just putting everybody in order here. I have Trustee Burgess, and then I have Student Trustee Jane is followed. She's indicated that she has 2 questions. What I'm going to do, Student Trustee Jane, is ask you to ask 1, and then I'll put the second one to the bottom of the list. So, so I've got Trustee Burgess, and then Student Trustee Jane on deck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is about the Indigenous education. This has always been a recurring priority for us. I understand from the response to the last question that there's some things that have been happening. But my question is, the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee hasn't really been meeting, and most of it was due to labor action sanctions prior to the pandemic. So there's been a significant part of this year, and I don't anticipate personally us meeting. I want to know what kind of confirmation you can give me as far as what's happening within our Indigenous community. And I appreciate the minutes we have in our hands from the last meeting, but there's nothing they're recognizing anything to things that are happening in the county, for example. They're all city-based. And how we're reaching out for new members to our community, and or anything that has anything to do with the things that were at the table when we stopped convening.
I think that question would go to Superintendent Howitt. It's Director Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Director Kelly. So there has been work that has continued during the school closure period. In terms of just last week, we had our very first our very first meeting, which was conducted remotely for our Indigenous education, our Indigenous Student Council. And there were 10 students that participated in that very first inaugural meeting. So that work has continued. We are reaching out to families personally through the great work of the Open Minds program and the FMNI support workers. A call has been made to every family that has self-ID'd. Regular calls are being made to provide support to families and connections to community supports, to support with our online or offline cultural packages that have been created during the school closure period. We're on volume 3 of those packages that are being prepared for distribution. We have worked with our community partners such as SOHAC as connections with our families. We have worked with the help of the IT department to ensure that families that have required technology have technology. You are correct that we haven't had an Indigenous Education Advisory Committee since the fall due to sanctions, but our first priority was to have the students engaged. So we've worked with personal connections with families, and we launched our first student council meeting for Indigenous students. That's what we've done to date.
That's very exciting. Madam Chair, if I could just ask, I didn't hear anything about language, Indigenous language acquisition. Is that informally or formally happening at all? I know that has been a real desire of the committee.
Yes, it remains a desire of the committee because language is fundamental to any culture, and in particular the Indigenous culture as well. Right now, there are no language classes occurring because of the school closure and social distancing, but it still remains a priority for us. I think what we're trying to do is contend with the situation that we've been dealing with. We focused on getting technology to students, providing cultural packages, making those personal connections. We've also got resources, tools for families that required it with nutritional packages to families. So this is a next step for us, Trustee Burgess, to seek what we can do during this time period to support language.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got student trustee Jane with her first question.
Thank you, Alicia. So I've had my questions regarding student marks. I've had a lot of students reaching out to me over the last few weeks, really concerned about their marks and really stressed out about what's going to be happening with that. And I'm very thankful that a statement was released for students and families to provide some clarity around marks yesterday. But I'm also a bit confused as to why our board has chosen to make midterm grades the benchmark for our students as opposed to what the ministry stated about leaving marks untouched after March 13th. I've had a lot of students reach out to me and tell me that they've had 10% drops in their marks. And while I am aware that there will be opportunities for students to raise their mark, it seems a little bit odd or a little unfair that some students in our board have had the security told by their teachers at the beginning of this distance learning process that their marks would be secure, while others have had to maybe deal with a 10% blow to their mark, even though they've been submitting their assignments, and they now have to work even harder and put even more stress on themselves to try to recover from this and improve their mark to what it was when they started this process, and to improve it to maybe what they want to have in the course. So I'm just wondering what our thought process was and maybe why we chose this benchmark as opposed to what the ministry guideline was.
If I could answer that question, Director Kelly? Yeah, that is the midterm mark. March 13th is the midterm mark. Just to clarify, that mark would have been considered the midterm mark. That's when the mark was calculated up to. That would have been happening for teachers anyway, for calculation of marks. As to your second point about the dropping of marks, that should not be happening. And those are individual situations that individual students who are involved in should contact certainly their teacher and the principal around that. But we have issued information, and we've certainly had discussions with the principal. You got to remember too that a lot of this information was coming down from the ministry in different ways, and so obviously there's going to be some communication, but certainly principals would be able to clarify that, and certainly can the secondary superintendents can answer as well, but I don't think they'll say anything different.
Then can I have a point of clarification or a supplementary to that, Alicia?
A supplementary is fine. Yeah, go ahead, student trustee Jane.
So when you say that the midterm mark is the March 13th mark, if students had one mark that they were seeing on March 13th. And then during this time, there may have been an assessment or something else, and they were then told a different mark around the time that midterm reporting happened. How exactly is that being dealt with? And do we have a system in place to ensure that everyone in our board is treated equally?
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that, and I'm just not sure what the specific student issue is or the specific course or whatever. And so I think that have to go through that. Would Superintendent Canty or Superintendent Pike like to speak to that at all? Because I know we've all been involved in it, in the communication, but perhaps there's greater clarification you could provide, but that's my understanding.
Yes, I would just reiterate what you had. This is Superintendent Canty. What you had said, Director Kelly, in terms of that is a conversation should happen with the student and parent and the school. The marks cannot go down from March 13th. That is the bare minimum mark that the student will receive. However, the student can improve his or her mark as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other administration want to speak to that, or can we do have a whole list of questions here? I just want to give everybody a chance to respond and without being able to see anybody. We'll move on from that. Student Trustee Jane, you'll have a second question coming up. So what I have in line here is Trustee Hatfield, and then Trustee Cheen will be on deck. So Trustee Hatfield, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like to, without repeating it, I'd like to echo the remarks that were made by Trustee Olmsted when she asked her question. I can't help but observing that we spent an hour tonight on a very informative presentation on environmental stewardship, and practically nothing from that presentation is anything that we're able to carry into our classrooms right now. And I think the thing that's burning out there in the public on everybody's mind, and if they were, wanting to listen into our meeting, our education committee meeting, they would want to know about what education looks like right now at our board. And although trustees do get reports, they're in brief format, and I understand that, and I also appreciate the reports from administration, but we have not really had an opportunity to engage directly with our public about what education looks like today and how it's looked the past couple months and how it's going to look the next couple months. So I can envision that we're now going to spend an hour on questions trying to flush out that information. So I guess I'm adding to this stressed environment that we're all in, and expressing a concern that I think we missed the boat tonight on giving the public what they need to hear. And I think that we're not hitting it on target by relying so heavily on web-based information. So I'd like to go back to the question about what else can we do. Has administration looked into other avenues of engaging the community? Have we looked at newspaper ads? Have we looked at radio talk show programs? Have we been putting out any other kind of communications with the community where we don't keep referring back to check the website? It seems that everything that's been said tonight pretty much goes back to, if you look at the website, you'll find it. But I'm not sure that we're alleviating the stress that is being felt by parents by constantly referring back to the website. A lot of parents, need to be on their computers or laptops from home for work purposes, and then the little bit of energy they have, they need to go back and check our website. So I'm not feeling comfortable with the information that I have as a trustee. I appreciate that we do get information, but I really don't know what everybody's doing in the system. And that's a question that gets asked most frequently, is what is everybody doing? So I don't know what all our departments are doing day to day. I don't know how else we're reaching out to families other than web-based information. And I think that we're at a critical point, as Trustee Olmsted pointed out very clearly about the stress levels in the families, and that concerns me. So I don't know. I guess I'm just expressing some frustration and some stress, but I'm like, it's very obvious that trustees and the public need to know more. And I'm not sure that we can get at that through this, which will probably be 1 hour or more question period. It tells me that we needed to do something else to provide information to our public. And I think that this would have been the perfect opportunity in our education committee to do it. So to boil it down to a question, how can we tell our families, tell our community, because it's not just families, it's not just kids, it's not just families with kids in school, but everybody wants to know what is our school board doing day to day, and how do we get that information out there other than referring everyone back to our website?
This is Director Kelly. There was a lot of questions and a lot of statements in there, so I don't even know where to begin. But I do hear you. We that is why we did the parent survey, to find out information about how parents were feeling. We recognize we're trying to communicate through various mediums. We do understand the stress. We will, and that's a good question for our senior team to find out ways that they can communicate. But I do urge people to contact the principal of the school, someone that and the teachers in the schools, because sometimes people call the board office and we answer the questions, but we're really not on the front line. We of course are here to help and want to help, but sometimes people think the schools are closed. They are, but the principal will pick up the call and we'll find a way to communicate. So I think more of that would be helpful. But I think you've raised some good points, and we're certainly brainstorm more ways that we can do. And again, as I said, suggestions, we are welcome to them. Everyone is feeling the stress as well. And I don't know if Superintendent Hillman wants to speak further to that, because I know that's your portfolio. And teachers are, by the way, calling their students. All teachers would be contacting their students regularly through EDSB or through a personal contact. So that has happened. That is an expectation that senior administration has with trustees, and many of those things were noted on the information sent. But I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to add.
I'm happy to comment, Madam Chair, through you. Part of what we do on a weekly basis is interact with principals and administrators. Certainly the messaging that we've had over the last number of weeks is the critical role that our teachers and principals play in supporting parents and families. So we've explicitly had these conversations that we need all board personnel to make sure they're not only knowing what do I need to do to teach my grade 4 student, but recognize the role that we play in supporting the families. So that kind of communication has explicitly gone to our leaders in the last 2 weeks. They have been requested to engage in reach out conversations to make sure that all teachers are aware of where resources are on the webpage, so that as parents engage with those kinds of questions, how do I do this, or I'm struggling with that our teachers are well positioned to support them. Our message has been for them as well to begin to reach out in new and different ways. And many of our schools are doing a fantastic job with this. Many are doing regular surveys. But to make sure that parents know that as Director Kelly has said, although the school building is closed, those personal contacts that you have are there, so that we are continuing and making sure that principals are messaging moving forward to all parents and guardians. If you have an issue, call the school and we'll fix it. If you need the guidance counselor to help you work through something, if you want to have a conversation with the CYW about how to help support your child, that all of those supports are here. They're just not physically there. So that is messaging that we're moving forward. We're asking schools, again, I think it's critical that schools be the point of contact. Although we regularly field calls from parents, I think the most critical thing right now is to have parents reach out to the people they know and trust the most. So I agree and support the notion that we reinforce those lines, that schools themselves know how to do that. And some of that is direct messaging to parents through EDSB. Some of that is the messaging they put out on the surveys they have in the web pages that they serve. But I certainly agree that anything we can do that helps our parents understand where the supports are, we should continue to do. And I'm wide open to helping with that thinking.
Thank you. Moving through the questions here, I do see trustees are asking questions online, and I appreciate that. Trustee Jane and Student Trustee Jane and Trustee Burgess both have second questions. I'm going to move Trustee Sipkar's first question ahead of yours, so I'm not missing you. I'm just letting you know where you are in the queue there, just so we can give everybody their first question first. So I have Trustee Cheen is up right now, and after that will be Trustee Halberstadt. So Trustee Cheen, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And my question actually has been asked by the student trustee Jean, and I just want to clarify that the mark of the whole semester won't be lower than the midterm mark, right? And that means the mark before the March 15 would be the final mark. Is that the policy of the school board? I want to clarify, or it's just the meter mark and the whole semester mark, final mark will be different?
It's Director Kelly, through you, Madam Chair. If I could answer, yes. Yes, the mark cannot be lower than the March 13th mark, which was the midterm mark. So the mark shouldn't fall. The mark could, however, be increased and improved, which of course students will want to do. So that is correct. The mark wouldn't be lower, but the mark can be improved.
Okay, thank you. And can I continue to ask a question?
Is it supplementary or is it separate to that? Does it have to do with the same
it's
question?
Different. Yeah,
okay,
I can wait in the list.
Yep,
Okay.
I'll put you at the end of the queue there. So I have Trustee Halberstadt, and up next will be Trustee Cook. So Trustee Halberstadt, go ahead. Oh, I'm not sure if your mic is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, my question has to do with a press release put out, I believe it was around March the 12th, which is just before the storm hit. It was a headline in the Windsor Star that the Windsor Essex County Health Unit has suspended 1,400 elementary students from school for incomplete immunization records. And it was the release was sent out by Dr. Waleed, who's the Chief Medical Officer in Windsor Essex. So I did ask this question internally, I think, to Superintendent Pike. I know the administrators are overwhelmed too, but I'm just wondering what the implications of that are. We got all these kids, students working at home, and they're suspended. So how's that? Were you able to follow that up and see what's what?
This is Superintendent Pike through the chair. May I answer? Thank you. I can't tell you the exact number of the number that you just quoted that are Greater Essex students. However, yes, they were suspended because of lack of immunization. However, with the pandemic moving forward, when school does resume, those suspensions will not continue. They are not considered to be suspended at this time.
So just supplementary then, they're basically going to be waived, is that right? Or they have been waived?
Again, it's Superintendent Pike. I can't speak for the health unit in terms of if they're waived or not. They are still recorded as not being, not having the immunization records to the health unit, and the health unit will follow up in different means at this point. It is during the pandemic that has caused the suspensions to change. So it would be up to the health unit to determine how they're going to collect those records. But at this point, for our purposes, the students would not still be considered to be suspended.
Thank you.
So I've got Trustee Cook, and then I've got Trustee Sipkar on deck, and then we'll start with second questions. I will pay attention in the chat for anybody that's got a first question. And I know Trustee Sartori is having difficulty with the chat, and so I've been paying attention for her to have any questions as well. So again, I'm not skipping over your second questions, but I'd like to get first questions in first. So we've got Trustee Cook right now, and then Trustee Sipkar is on deck. Go ahead, Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've been listening to this conversation, the comments and the questions. and I stated last meeting a lot of my concerns about some of these kids that are going to be falling through the cracks. We've talked tonight about skill, capacity limits, and struggles. Those all exist. We've talked about stress and anxiety for students and parents, but I just want to stress that there's stress and anxiety for our teachers also. I've talked to some teachers. I've been watching, reading social media. The teachers are very stressed too because they want to make sure that they are trying and contacting all their students and doing their best to engage those students and motivate those students. My concerns are some of the kids even that I work with from RCC are falling behind. We just received iPads just last week. So these kids have been that long, what was it, like 4 weeks without any technology. My other concern and question is moving forward, obviously the curriculum, this year's curriculum, especially the second half, obviously, is not going to be completed. So my concern is when the kids go back to school, what's going to happen? The kids that are falling behind and the curriculum isn't completed, what will happen when they return to school? It's not like you can just start a brand new grade and forget about the past curriculum. That's one of my questions is what's going to happen. I just think that we need to plan, not just our board, but all boards. Obviously, the government, provincial government needs to be involved. And we need to make a plan is what are we going to do when we get back to school? And just before I finish, I've seen fantastic things going on too. Some of the schools that I've commented on and responded to are Roseville, Beaton Bulldogs, Parkview, Herman, Riverside, all doing amazing things, and lots of other schools too. I just wrote down some names. Some of the other kinds of engagement I believe that we could do are radio, TV, and I know teachers are calling and like making personal calls. I commend them for what they are doing, but again, we're going to have a big group of students, families that are still falling through those cracks. But my question is, when do we start talking about what we're going to do when we return to school?
Thank you for your comments. This is Director Kelly. Is it okay if Madam Chair, if I respond, and others may have responses too? I think you make a very good point about the teacher stress, and thank you. Thank you for acknowledging the stressful time that this has been for teachers who are really trying to do their best. In fact, I got a comment from a teacher the other day just saying how much great professional development she has had since this challenge. And so we are really trying our best to support our teachers through that. I think the other main question that you're asking is what is it going to happen when students return? I mean, there'll obviously have to be some look at what the gaps are in the learning. And of course, this is something the province as well as our local board is beginning to discuss. Again, we don't know when we'll be returning, which I know will be, challenging for all of us as we wait to see. But there is no doubt that there will be some gaps and that we will have to address those. I know the ministry has talked about what they might do in terms of summer programming, and as our board has always been very robust in the area of summer programming. But we have already talked about that. I know Superintendent Canty and I have had conversations about what that might look like in terms of assisting with the gaps, and certainly the return next year. I think that is something, as you know, you have to figure out. Not only is it the learning pieces, is as you reopen, it is extraordinarily complex. There are many things that you need to think about. What does a school day look like? Is the social distancing? What happens with our buildings as we move forward? So there are many aspects of it. But I know your concern is the learning, but there's all of those other things that are going to have to be taken into account. But surely we do need to look at what learning outcomes have been missed, and what kinds of things do we need to do to intervene? And those are the very questions that we're asking and that we're beginning to discuss. So thank you. Your points are all well taken. Certainly they're concerns for us too. Thank you, Trustee Cook.
Are there any other superintendents that would like to comment? Okay, hearing none. Trustee Sipcar's first question, and then I've got student trustee Jane with her second question on deck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just be brief. It's more of a comment. I don't know where this fits, but I'm just hearing all of the concerns and the concerns from other trustees, and it's reminding me that the role of a trustee is in fact to bring a lot of the concerns of the community forward, and get answers publicly so that other community members are able to hear these things. And one of the things I wonder if it might be more effective if we had something, if we amended our agenda or had something right up top that is a COVID-19 update at every meeting. I know we only have maybe 3 or 4 more before the end of the school year, but I wonder if because these are issues and pressing questions, and it does end up shifting to the end of our meeting when we do have other regular business that I think is still important that we attend to. I'm wondering what administration might feel about if we amend our agendas of some sort. So I don't know where this fits in, but I just want to throw it out there as a question, as an update for trustees. And then that way we can have all these answers maybe more concisely right up at the beginning of our meetings.
It's Director Kelly. I'm again, through you, Madam Chair. I don't know whether that would be something the chair would like to discuss, but we did plan to do an update on some of the things in June at the education meeting about lots of the things that we're doing. We could certainly do some of that through the director's report or find other ways to perhaps deal with the chair and vice chair. If that's helpful, I'm glad to. I'd like specific ideas though, because COVID is a pretty huge thing. And so we would, if we could have some guidance on that, that would be helpful. Again, I'm cognizant of the fact that staff would be putting together presentations. So I'm just cognizant of their time. So if we could have some guidelines, that would be helpful. But trustee question period is also a good chance to answer questions.
Thank you, Director Kelly. I will say from a chair's perspective of the Education Committee, that is something that we have discussed for June. So that will be coming up absolutely in June. Although this is the time to ask these questions. We are able to ask these questions, and we should, while we have the time and have everybody in the room, this is the place to be asking them. So I appreciate all these questions. Thank you very much, trustees. Student trustee Jane, your second question, and then I've got trustee Burgess on deck for her second question.
Thanks, Alicia. So my second question is about final exams. I know that the minister had released a statement that pretty much took exam days and made them into instructional days again. So I'm just wondering how our board is now handling exams. Are we choosing to cancel them, or are we doing final summative examinations instead? What exactly is going on with that?
I know that's an item of discussion. Again, Director Kelly, the minister talked about that. He talked about the cancellation of examinations days, not necessarily exams, but that obviously would be difficult to do when you don't have exam days. So we are looking into more information on that, but I think there would be some kind of both formative and summative assessments. So maybe Superintendent Canty could answer more fulsome on that, if that's okay.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. This is Superintendent Canty. I think I want to start just by saying that I'm really thankful that our board, with the direction of Director Kelly, she had the insight. Our board is one of the few boards in Ontario that gave a report card mark to our students. And that is the official mark that students are working to improve now. And it's about continuity of learning. We know there's going to be gaps. We know we're not going to cover all of our curriculum. However, it's about keeping kids engaged and ensuring that they're in a good place when we do eventually get back to regular school. In terms of exams, the examination days are now instructional days. We know this. However, we're hoping that there will be a culminating assignment at the end of each course so students can improve their marks. The May 31st date is what we're looking at now in terms of going back. That may, of course, change. And if it does, we may not be back in school to actually write an exam anyway. So it would be a culminating activity that's built on the formative assessments that students are doing now.
Student trustee Danger, do you have a supplementary to that?
Yes. So Superintendent Canty, you just said that the mark on the report card that students are going to be receiving in the mail is now the mark they're working to improve. How exactly does that play into, or how does that affect students whose mark on the report card right now is lower than their March 13th grade, and like what exactly is the protocol for them to follow to like how can they advocate for themselves to ensure their mark continues to be at the March 13th grade that's not maybe reflected on their midterm report card?
Okay, so as we said, the report card was based on what students had completed by March 13th. If there's a discrepancy there, again, I would tell the student and parent to go back to the school and have a conversation with the principal. However, that should be the very lowest mark, and it will be the lowest mark they could possibly achieve. The idea here is if students are engaged and are continuing to do the work provided by the teacher, they have that mark that was on the midterm report. They cannot get a lower mark by the end of the course.
It's Director Kelly. If I could add something, because I think there's a bit of confusion through you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yes, I think maybe that there might be some confusion about students looking into their EDSB marks and seeing that it might be not the midterm mark, that they might have been following other marks. So it's the mark on the report card that they would have received that is the mark. It's not that ongoing mark necessarily in EDSB. It was the midterm mark. So I just wonder if there might be some confusion on that. Sometimes people go in and look at their mark book, depending on how teachers are communicating their evaluation. So that may lead to some of the confusion. Just an idea. But again, as Superintendent Canty said, a communication with the teacher and principal would be the way to go.
Thank you. So just to clarify that a little bit of confusion, I think Student Trustee Jane, if there are students contacting you about that, it sounds like if there is some confusion, in order to get that completely flushed out, and they should probably be contacting their school principal about it. So that mark that came home on the report card is the official mark. And then if there's some discrepancy in there on a case-by-case basis, that should be addressed to the school principal. Hopefully that helps clear some of that up. Thank you for advocating for your fellow students. I very much appreciate that. Thank you. So I've got second question from Trustee Burgess, second question from Trustee Chin on deck. So Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good segue, because my question was about final exams, but it actually goes beyond that. So confirmation that there aren't any more professional development days, which makes me question, is there any additional professional development happening for our staff? And is it voluntary now, whatever? And there are no final examination days on our calendar. They will be instructional days. I get that. We only have school officially closed till May 31st. If we go back in June, and I think that's a huge if, but I'm most concerned for students who are in Trustee Johnny and Trustee Jane's position, and they're graduating and they're going on to post-secondary pursuits. I want to know what our board is doing, either at the provincial level, the local level, what we can do in our advocacy, to help those kids bridge to the next step. Whether it's September, next January, whenever it is, what is the discussion you're having about the summertime program, for example, for upgrading or finding out what's missed? And what's the role of the guidance counselor and the teacher in giving a really personalized report, actually showing not only the successes, but what gaps the student will have in their professional judgment if they were going to college or university or an apprenticeship, because there will be gaps and they'll be very individual. And you don't want to highlight that, but you want to support our students. And some of that support's going to happen through the summer. So I want to know what our discussions are, what you can crystal ball or whatever, for our graduating students, how their education has been compromised through, distance learning and emergency learning, how we can support them to be as successful as they can in post-secondary.
Through you, Madam Chair, this is Director Kelly. I will attempt to answer that. That is a very big question, and we will be looking at summer school models for that. Also, there has been good conversations with the colleges and universities at the provincial level with the understanding because they're actually in the very same position for students moving from year 1 to year 2, and I'm sure you grasp that. So that's the challenge, and certainly that is on our radar, and we understand the challenges of that. I think post-secondary education will be very accommodating and very helpful in this regard, but there are good discussions going on that we also have looked at those summer learning, not just for our graduating students, but for other students. How is it we could adapt based on the timelines and based on the situation? And I know, as I said, that Superintendent Canty and Principal Proctor have worked on some models. So those are things we're still exploring. We're well aware that those are going to be challenges. And could we be back June 1st? I don't know. Would this carry on? Those are a lot of the parameters, but there is provincial working groups on that as well. So we're thinking about it. Those are the kinds of discussions we're having.
So just supplemental part of the clarification too is, since we're not having final exams, supposedly, in the more traditional sense, how can we be assured that assessment from school to school, from district to district, et cetera, has as much integrity as we hope in order to inform the post-secondary pursuit?
We have to trust the professional judgment of our teachers who know the abilities of students and the capacities of their learning and whether those students have demonstrated those understandings. We have to have good faith in professionals that do this work and that know. It will be a challenging year to do assessment. It will. But be careful too to remember that examinations aren't the only way to assess. There's many ways to assess, and I have found it extraordinarily interesting hearing some students and some teachers talk about how the assessment they've learned something. Different students have different voices through the different modalities that we're learning through. So I really count on the professionalism of our teachers and principals to assure that they do their best to assess students. And I think there is really, despite all this emergency learning, there's really some good learning happening, some good assessment practices, some great professional development for our teachers. Many have taken courses. If you looked at the notepads, there was a number that had signed up for that. So we are continuing with that, but this is something that's on certainly of discussion for us all the time. We're all learning, but yes, we are concerned about our students, but I have every faith in their ability. I just want to add that our students are well positioned as good thinkers and good learners, and they will get through this.
Thank you. Just on that, I want to add that I work at a post-secondary institution in online learning. This has been quite a ride for us. And just for any parents that are listening for their students or students who are listening, we care about you in post-secondary too, even before you get there. We're preparing for you. So there are lots of talks going on at that level, because all of your colleagues that are and your peers that are coming in with you are coming in with the same sort of abilities, and so and the same sort of challenges. We've all kind of endured this together, and I can't speak for all institutions, but I can speak for the love of education that we all have in those jobs, that we care about those students too. So we'll work in tandem, I'm sure of it. So I have Trustee Cheen with a second question and Trustee Olmsted with a second question. So Trustee Cheen, go ahead, and then it'll be Trustee Olmsted right after.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is from a parent, and today we got a message that universities and colleges, they are preparing the online teaching for the whole autumn semester, and the parent just asked, and if our board has a similar plan for the online teaching for the whole semester, next semester, and if we planned the more active teacher leading study, online study for the students, especially for the young kids, and currently kind of a lot of materials are separated and built up for the parents to lead the students, and if we can use similar software as Zooms that the teacher can lead all the students and in an active way to help them to keep on study. And if we have such long-term preparation for next semester. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's Director Kelly again. At this time, we have plans for what we might do for summer school, as by the way do the colleges and universities, because they too are adapting to how they can support students going in. I wanted to make a note of that. But at this point, we await the ministry's decision on what's going to happen. But I think we've learned a lot about a distance learning model and how we could engage students, and I'm sure some teachers are really finding a good way to engage and others are finding it more challenging, but a lot of teachers are using Teams, which is what we're using now, and they are engaging in regular conversation with students, and I'm sure that will continue. But yeah, we're adapting to it, and I know you mentioned Zoom. It's not something that our board is supporting. We have certain platforms that we're supporting, our EDSB, our Brightspace, and also our Microsoft Teams. So those are the platforms we're using to communicate with our students at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Kelly. We've got Trustee Olmsted with her second question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Summer learning has been touched on a few times in the last few questions, and I was just wondering if we're going to be sticking with a similar model from the past years. Will students still be able to accumulate new credits moving forward in the summer, or redo courses to improve their marks? Or are there any plans for that program to move forward for some of our students who perhaps missed out on some learning March through June and want to perhaps redo the credit online through e-learning or do like a summer co-op or something of that nature? Are there any plans in place for that to happen?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's Director Kelly, and I would, Superintendent Candy can add to this. I know that there was going to be regular opportunity to upgrade, but also to have courses granted. Also, we always have summer learning for our younger students as well. So again, we have to think about what that looks like. But we may look at different models of learning gaps. But I look to Superintendent Candy because I know you and Principal Proctor have talked about some opportunities and some new ways of perhaps doing things.
Thank you, Director Kelly, and through you, Madam Chair. We're looking at 3 different models that we may be able to use this summer. The first model is looking at if things remain the same right now and everything will be online, and those courses are going to be offered through Brightspace and through the guidance counselors at the schools. The second model is if there's a lightening of if some students are allowed to go some of the time to school, it'll be a hybrid model. And then, of course, the third model, which likely won't happen, is if things were completely normal and kids could go to the traditional school. So we are looking at all these models, and we're looking also at not only full courses, but improvement courses as well, which the minister came out recently and said will be offered. So we're in the preliminary stages. We have put the courses that are going to be offered in our Brightspace so students can go and begin looking at those. My blueprint, I should say. And hopefully we'll be able to really give a rigorous program that gets our students ready for the next year.
Thank you very much. Do any other trustees have any other questions? I have one. Just to wrap up, my question was kind of touched upon in a few questions that we had this evening, but it's specifically about tech delivery. So we do have some families and students still without tech, and I'm wondering where we are in that process and when we can expect it to be complete. When we're talking about assessments and we're talking about continuity, and we're talking about connection, which I think having families connected back in with their communities and students connected back in with their peers is a huge part of the learning experience, and parents feeling like they have a place for their child's learning to continue. I'm wondering where we are at in that process, how much longer we think that might go, and if there's any way that that politically we can financially support some other supplementary to the work that's continuing to go on with that. So I don't know if that's Superintendent Kelly or possibly Superintendent Mills may be able to answer that.
Yep.
Hi, it's Superintendent Mills, through you, Chair. Yes, we are now done phase 2 of tech distribution. That wrapped up today. So what we found was a big uptake in phase 1, but as word spread, our phase 2 was even larger than phase 1. So as we were making more contacts with our families, as teachers were reaching out to our families and finding out that they did not have tech at home, we had a larger demand in phase 2. We are going to be starting phase 3 tomorrow, which means we collect as much technology as we can, as fast as we can. One of the issues we face, it's not as simple as just handing a device to a student, especially when it comes to the laptops. We have to re-image those so that they can be used in the home environment. So all of the devices have to go through IT, they get re-imaged, and then we get them out as fast as we can to families. So phase 3 will be starting tomorrow, probably looking at about another week for phase 3 to be wrapped up. At that point, we'll have about 3,600 devices in the hands of students. That does not also include C equipment, which accounts for about another 2,000 devices.
So just thank you very much for that. Supplementary to that, so if as we're kind of continuing to reach out to families, so if I'm hearing it correctly, by the end of next week, if a family does not have a device by the end of next week, what is their kind of last step in order to be able to gain access to something like that?
Well, one of the things that we are doing is we are really monitoring the levels of inventory that we have. We had a plan of how many laptops went out to kids and what grade level. As we've kind of, lack of a better term, run out of laptops, that grade level has increased. So iPads go out to students that are in a little bit older grades. So we're gauging that inventory right now as they come in. We're still dealing with principals on specific requests from families if they do have them, but that would be the way that they would reach out, is through the principal.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate that. Thank you, trustees. Thank you, administration. I know that was a lot for everybody, but it's we are accountable to the public, and most of us in here are parents, and those of us that aren't are connected to the to what's going on in huge ways. And I just wanted to thank you for those great questions, and for seeing your communities, and for bringing that those questions to the people who can answer them. And for those parents who you know of in your communities that aren't able to watch tonight, or have had it with screens and couldn't watch tonight, I encourage you to pass this information along to them as well. So do we have, moving on through the agenda, do we have any notices of motion for this committee? Any notices of motion for this committee? Do we have any announcements? Any announcements from trustees? I don't see any coming up in the chat here. I have one. It is, apropos again, Teacher Appreciation Week. We are in it right now, and I want to, on behalf of, if I can speak on behalf of trustees, and hopefully on behalf of senior administration, if you'll allow me to, a completely heartfelt thank you and appreciation for everything that you are doing that we see, everything that you are doing that we don't see, every minute that you lie awake in bed at night wondering about your student who didn't get a hold of you today. Every time you wonder if a parent is doing okay, all the support staff that are calling to make sure that our students are okay, and all while you are home with your own families and dealing with your own stresses and anxieties. And the work that you are doing right now will last far beyond these small interactions with your students. These are huge interactions and huge impacts that we are experiencing right now along with you. And I want to thank you. And I'm Trustee Hatfield has corrected me. Thank you very much, Trustee Hatfield. It is Staff Appreciation Week. I was looking on Twitter at Teacher Appreciation Week, but Staff Appreciation as well. And I cannot express enough. I do not have enough words to thank you for everything that you are doing. It was just Principals Appreciation Day the other day. What we are doing right now to maintain continuity for our families, what we are doing right now to maintain continuity for ourselves as professionals is exceptional. And thank you very much. And we see you and we appreciate you so much. So thank you very, very, very much. And with that, we will adjourn into our Operations and Finance Committee. Thank you all so much.
You may have to unmute, Alan.
Okay. Yes. So we will start off with our Ops and Finance Committee meeting. Before I call the meeting to order, I think I'd like to remind people that this is a live stream and they could pick it up on our website, right? There would be a link if they want to pick it up later, tomorrow, or weekend or whatever. I think it might be quite instructional for people who have the same questions that our trustees have passed on to our administration. So I think that'll be on the front page of our website, the link. I hope so. Okay, call to order. Attendance. Melissa, is everybody here?
Yes.
Okay, everybody here. Approval of the agenda. Have a mover. Trustee Leclerc. Seconder. Trustee Higginson. All in favor? Opposed?
Support.
Anybody opposed? No? Okay. Pass. Declaration of conflict of interest. None. Approval of the minutes. February the 4th, 2020 Operations and Finance Committee meeting. We have a motion to approve the minutes. Trustee Leclerc, Trustee Higginson, all in favor? Or anybody not in favor? All in favor? Business arising from the minutes? Any of those? No?
Alan, I think you muted yourself again.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. Yes, business operational plan presentations from Superintendent Armstrong.
Good evening, everyone. This is Superintendent Armstrong, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share with you an overview of the business department and the great work that is being done. And we'll just wait for a second. There we go. I'd like to also welcome Sean Mayhew, who is the Manager of Financial Services. And I would also like to welcome Juliana Hinchliff, our Manager of Facility Services, who will take you through portions of this presentation. Next. So this slide provides a high-level overview of those areas that fall under the business department. Next. Next, please. I have a wonderful team of individuals overseeing key areas of responsibility in the business department. And this organizational chart highlights the business department management team. Next. And I'd like to ask Ms. Hinchliffe to please take us through the facility services slides.
Thank you. Next, please. I'd like to introduce you to my crack team who make me look good for sure. Stephanie Fati is my assistant. Brad Giori manages the coordinator of operations. Rick Emery, or coordinator of capital projects. Rick Emery is operations. Steve LaBelle is maintenance. Tim Lozon is our health and safety officer for the board. And Keith DeGroot is our process engineer. So these are the pillars of the department. Next, please. In terms of operation and maintenance, we manage 5.4 million square feet of board infrastructure with a replacement value of $1 billion. We manage all rentals and community use policy and community use of schools. In operations, we provide cleaning services with 238 permanent staff and 39 replacement custodians. Operations is also responsible for all landscaping, grounds maintenance, waste management, pest control, snow removal, and grass cutting. Maintenance is responsible for maintenance and operation of all building systems, compliance with legislation and codes, including fire, safety, electrical, TSSA, and building code. We employ 38 skilled trades and maintenance staff, along with using external contractors to provide these services. Next. In the capital projects department, Brad is responsible for the renovation and new construction of all our school buildings and also the energy management portfolio. We currently have $40 million in renovations and major repairs in progress or planned. We have $133 million in new construction in progress or planned. We manage $7.2 million in the utility budget. We also manage the board's energy conservation and demand management plan. We participate in and work actively in the school's eco school since 2003. We also ensure board compliance with the lead and drinking water legislation, and Brad's portfolio also includes waste minimization. Next. The Health and Safety Department is responsible for ensuring board compliance to the 34 Occupational Health and Safety Acts and regulations. Also, the maintenance and implementation of the board's health and safety, workplace violence, workplace harassment policies, and management programs. And also the implementation and maintenance of the annual accident and injury prevention plan. Next. This is something that I'm especially proud of, is that we have been ISO certified since 2003. And the mission statement that you see on the left-hand side has been our mission statement since 1998. The 6 bullet points underneath the processes outline our goals and objectives that we have key indicators for as we go through the year. So we have 106 operating procedures. We provide and develop training to support those operating procedures and all our processes. We measure, our goal is to maintain a good partnership with principals and provide good customer service, which we monitor through a facility survey. We continuously improve services and performance by soliciting green flags or improvement ideas from our staff. We provide clean schools to a standard, which we measure through no repeated below expectations on cleaning assessments. We maintain schools in good standards with making sure our backlog, work order backlog is no greater than 6 months, and we get at least 80% of our work orders completed on time. We also maintain our schools in good condition by finalizing projects within 6 months of substantial completion. We maintain energy efficient buildings by annually looking for and planning for a 2% reduction in energy and water consumption. And we look for a 10% reduction in occupational health and safety reportable injuries is our way of preventing accidents and injuries. Next.
Thank you. At this time, it's Superintendent Armstrong. At this time, I'd like to call on Sean Mayhew to present some information with respect to financial services.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. Next slide. It's Sean Mayhew, Manager of Finance, speaking. There's our organizational chart, and we'll talk about the main areas of responsibility in our area, which is accounting, accounts payable, and school-generated funds, payroll, purchasing, and budget. And you can see the supervisors there, the fantastic team I have: Leah Beneteau, Dawn Lamontagne, Teresa Nellis, Jackie Farrell, and Kathy Dominato are my support in this area. Next. Including Superintendent Armstrong and her administrative assistant, Tammy Malosh, there are a total of 25 employees in the finance department. One of the areas not specifically listed here, as it supports finance as well as other departments, is office services, and we do supervise that area as well. Office services provides photocopying and mail services for the building and system, such as those programming packages that are going out to students right now. They're involved in that. The hard copy of your board package that you would have got this evening, they produce that, and they're involved in a lot of other support for the system. Before I move on, I want to acknowledge the flexibility and endurance of this department during the current pandemic. Along with all of you, we have adjusted in a dynamic way to preserve controls over the board's finances and ensure all essential services are delivered while maintaining strong customer service of the entire system, to the entire system. So a big thank you goes out to our finance department. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about the area of accounting first. As you know, ministry reporting is very detailed, and accounting must follow the ministry established code of accounts. Our general ledger is very detailed in nature to accommodate that reporting structure, having over 6,500 accounts. Greater Essex is the banker board for the local transportation consortium. We process payments on their behalf. We administer payroll, benefits, and other services such as HR, IT. There's a long list of standards, regulations, laws that all need to be adhered to on an annual basis, and this department is subject to an external audit and various ministry review procedures. There are also internal audits that occur on a regular basis. Really, this department monitors 36,000 transactions that happen throughout the year. This department also is responsible for the recovery of expenses through billing, various ministries, employee recoveries for such things as benefits, billings for community use of schools, etc. The accounting department provides finance support to schools, budget managers, superintendents, and the more accurate and timely financial information equals better informed decision-making ability for the senior leadership team. Next. Payroll. Total payroll and benefits represent approximately 80% of our entire budget. Therefore, this department is responsible for payments amounting to approximately $360 million. That represents wages, benefits, government, and pension remittances. All payroll is completed in-house. This is not a usual payroll process or cycle. We have 20 pay groups and 13 collective agreements, all of which have different processing requirements and different terms of payment. It's a very complex system that is managed here. that require strict controls and a high degree of attention to detail. This group administers all the defined pension plans, which are the contributions, the rules, and reporting in those areas. And there's over 5,700 T-slips issued in 2019 to full-time, part-time, and occasional employees. Next. The accounts payable and school-generated funds area. This department processes over 35,000 invoices each year. Processing means ensuring the accuracy and approval of each payment and the proper tax implications with respect to HST. This also includes ensuring payments are made on time. This department processes all visa charges and reimburses employee expenses. The accounts payable department supports the capital projects process from initial payment to release of the holdback. This department ensures all expenses adhere to policies, regulations, and procedures. This department provides support and oversight for school-generated funds, which are all the fundraising accounts held at the schools, representing approximately 100 accounts. This department provides direct assistance for secretaries setting up fundraising items in School Cash Online, assisting with school-based accounting, and providing guidance to principals and vice principals in the approval process and administration of their school accounts. Next. Purchasing and procurement. The goal of this department is to ensure that students and staff are equipped with the resources they need, ordering and securing contracts for supplies, services, furniture, equipment, and other capital. The purchasing department ensures all purchases follow ministry guidelines and board policies and procedures. This group processes over 2,500 POs every year. Each dollar spent adheres to public guidelines to ensure taxpayer confidence and fairness. As you are all aware, there are many capital projects and school builds on the go. This group is vital to the procurement of all materials and services required for those projects. The purchasing department administers all board-issued Visa cards with an annual spend of $2 million. Next slide. And then there's the budget area. When considering operating and capital funding, Greater Essex budget is over $500 million every year, a very large budget. The budget is approved in June and the process is all year long. The development of the budget begins in January with meetings with each budget owner, approver to discuss budgetary pressures, opportunities. Enrollment projections and staffing occurs in March and April, and that forms the basis for the budget. When the GSN technical paper is released, a detailed analysis is completed to determine the impact to Greater Essex. Budget discussions, analysis, and consultation period presumes, and ultimately the budget goes to the trustees for approval in June. The budget is revised in December for known changes, which are adjustments to staffing, at reorg, and actual enrollment at October 31st is considered in the revised estimates. The budget is monitored throughout the year by comparing actual results, and a quarterly report is issued to trustees. Supporting all departments are a business analyst and a business clerk that work closely with me, and they assist in this in the budget process. Next, and I'll turn it back over to you, Superintendent Armstrong.
Hi, I'd like to spend a few moments to discuss or to share with you information about our social community services. Next, please. The Social and Community Services team is led by Shelley Lucier, who is the coordinator, and she's with the assistance of Ophelia Dugal, who is the supervisor. Next. The employment services that are offered by the Employment Assessment Center are funded through the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development. Services offered include individual employment counseling, employment related to workshops, employment training supports for clients, employer financial subsidies, assistance for clients making applications to second career funding, partnerships, as well as programs through the Canada-Ontario Jobs Grant. Next, please. Just some information regarding the Employment Assessment Center. Over $125,000 in placement incentives were provided to employers in the city. Over $140,000 of placement incentives were provided to employers in the county. The center also allocated funding of $400,000 to over 30 employers for training opportunities for their employees and new hires through the Canada-Ontario Jobs Grant. As well, eligible clients were given supports to assist with the purchase related to work boots, interview clothing, and transportation costs. Next, please. The EAC Center also partners with our Adult Learning Center in order to support our other students in our system. For example, the ALC, or the Adult Learning Center, does offer ESL, English as a Second Language, classes at the EAC offices. And also the team collaborates with Student Success, co-op, and guidance counselors, and is expanding its partnership in our secondary schools to reach those students that may be looking for employment once they graduate high school. Next, please. The Employment Assessment Center also offers language assessment services to newcomers. These services are funded through the Ministry of Community and Social Services, which is a provincial ministry, as well as the Ministry of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, which is a federal ministry. In 2019-20, the Employment Assessment Center conducted our highest number of language assessments at over 1,850. Next. Now I'd like just to take a moment to share some information with you with respect to the Windsor-Essex Student Transportation Services, or WESTS as we would call it. Next, please. WESTS is a consortium representing the 4 coterminous school boards, and it is its own separate legal entity. As previously mentioned, the Greater Essex County District School Board is the banker board for the consortium. The WESTS team is led by Gabrielle McMillan, who is the general manager for the consortium. Next. WESTS works cooperatively and in partnership with boards, schools, and operators to ensure that students are transported safely and as efficiently as possible. And as you will see from this slide, they do a lot of great work. For example, they transport 16,500 GECDSB students to school safely. They travel 36,617 kilometers per day as part of the school routes. In September, at the beginning of school startup, there could be anywhere between 265 and 300 bus changes that are processed every day by WESTS for student requirements. They also spend a great deal of time ensuring the safe transportation of students who have special needs and may have special equipment. And there's a lot of amendment of roads that may have to occur because of construction in the area. Next. Other key activities that are performed by WESTS include annually reviewing our bell times to find efficiencies in routing. That is done in conjunction with our coterminous boards. They also review the buskids.ca website, and they make sure that electronic communication is shared with our families through their website. They administer the Safety Patrol program and ensure that there is student involvement in the safe travel to school, which includes not just busing, but also students who are walking. They develop information packages and training tools to assist operators, school staff, students, and parents. And they also participate in our active and safe travel committees and programs. And for example, the board's active transportation committee has representation from WESTS. Next, please. And with that, I would invite questions. And I also want to make sure that I mention Tammy Malosh, who's just a wonderful, wonderful administrative assistant. And she keeps everybody in this department on track and on target and is a very positive influence. And I just wanted to make sure that I recognized her efforts as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm not asking for questions. I see that Trustee Simcoe Hatfield has a question.
I do. Thank you for the report. I really appreciate the refresher on what the department does. But my question has to do with the reality of today. So I'd like to know if you could summarize in your report how we're carrying on all those functions that you just reviewed and what it looks like today in the new reality. Because I don't have a clue. I don't know anything about how all our people are carrying out their work. I don't know anything about how the finance department is working with intense security controls from home. I don't know anything about what our transportation system is doing right now. So that's my question. It's been my question all along tonight. So thank you for the review, but I would really like it to relate to what the new reality has been the past couple months and how it looks now. Thank you.
This is Superintendent Armstrong. Thank you for your question. I'll start off answering the question, and then I would encourage my team to come in as well. It's definitely been a challenge. I think it would be naive to suggest that it hasn't been. Right now, all of the functions effectively in the business department, that would be through Mr. Mayhew's department, are continuing. All of the staff are working remotely from home. Our payroll continues to be processed. If there are records of employment or any type of source deduction or remittances that need to be made, government reporting, pension reporting, that work continues. Our accounts payable staff are also working remotely from home. They continue to process and pay vendors. They continue to work with our various facilities to process purchase orders and to support the receiving of goods and services. The budget department continues to do the work the best that they can. And I'll discuss that a little bit further in the agenda with respect to the work on our budget. Our accounting clerks, they continue to work as well remotely from home. They are processing invoices. They are assisting school staff, principals and secretaries with school cash online questions, with assistance on their bank reconciliations and any other accounting requirements that they have. In terms of facility services, Juliana's team continues to be busy monitoring our construction projects. They have paused briefly because of the ministerial direction and order. However, there's a lot of work that's being done from a health and safety perspective. We're doing inspections of playground equipment. We're doing preventative maintenance in schools and continuing with that work as well. In terms of the Employment Assessment Center, the counselors continue to work remotely from home, providing remote services to our clients who are job searching. And we've also joined the Essential Services Registry, and we are assisting clients in the community who are looking for positions in essential services. From a transportation perspective, that's probably work that is paused somewhat because bus drivers, for example, that work through the operators are obviously not transporting students. However, transportation still is looking towards planning routes for September and is connecting with schools to get transportation applications to support those efforts. In terms of that, I would turn it over to my team if I have missed anything else.
Would you mind if I just add a couple of things? This is Juliana Hinchliffe. We also at Facility Services continue to meet as a team. My schedule for Teams meetings is from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 at night, and most of my team is involved. We continue to move forward with all our initiatives that we've been working on. Custodians continue to support schools with an initial deep clean of all the schools earlier this month. We continue to schedule custodians in schools to perform sanitization after people have been in. We continue to rely on my management staff, the supervisors and the coordinators, to do legislated responsibilities that are required in schools. We've now started our preventative maintenance and building maintenance staff with doing building checks that are required for insurance purposes every 48 hours. From a capital projects point of view, nothing has slowed down. We continue to tender work. We continue to work through the construction process, which requires a lot of pre-work before we start. Based on the ministerial order that has come out recently, we're looking at opportunities to start activities in schools related to construction. So we've been keeping quite busy, if that helps.
That helps a lot.
Supplementary.
Yeah, I didn't hear. I know that in the audit committee meetings there over the years, there have been a lot of discussion about the security of our computer systems and information, and I didn't hear how that's being handled by people working remotely from home.
Thank you for that question. This is Superintendent Armstrong. I can speak with respect to the business department. So all of our accounting, payroll, accounts payable staff have been provided with board supply technology. So in terms of laptops and what we call VPN access that provides security in terms of the information that they are accessing through their Wi-Fi and through the board technology.
Okay, so they're not working on their own computers.
That is correct. They are not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a bit of a list here. Trustee Shin.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Chair. And my feeling is that since the budget has been approved before, and it is not really, updated due to the current COVID situation, and as for example, for the transportation department, and they are still paying for the transportation as before. My question is that during the summer, we might, there is a possibility that we may take some time to make up the school, and we may have extra cost during the summer or after that. And what I'm thinking that if you have make a preparation that any cost after that for the employees, for the transportation, for other, if we have spent as usual the budget, do we have any, makeup plan for the extra additional cost after that, after the this closer time? Thank you.
Okay. Somebody answer that.
This is Superintendent Armstrong. To clarify, the transportation staff are not employees of the board. They are employees of the Windsor-Essex Transportation, Student Transportation. So it's a separate legal entity, and it's managed by the four coterminous boards. I'd like to just clarify that first. In terms of the impact of the pandemic, certainly there have been opportunities where we have not been spending as much money. For example, there may be, for example, office supplies or utility costs, for example, could be down. In terms of what summer school or what things will look like once we are given the approval to reopen schools, that's a great question, but we don't have direction from the ministry at this time in terms of what we would do with any cost savings or what we would do with additional costs. So we would be looking to the ministry for that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we have Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is in the same theme. It's about what's happening now, what's happened for the last 2 months, and more importantly, what's going forward. I'm wondering, in the presentation, you talked, Juliana, Ms. Hinchliffe's presentation, you talked about all the maintenance, all the daily work, what we do, what we're responsible for. Do you anticipate any changes either in schedules or products or routines or daily cleansing, because once school is reconvened, because it is a new reality, because COVID-19 is still going to be actively in society, in the environment, and we're going to be housing a lot of people in close proximity. Is there any provincial advice that anybody's getting for reopening, as far as making sure that our level of cleanliness involves a really virulent thing, and indoor air quality, all of that? Have we looked at it from that perspective for when we populate our schools again?
This is Superintendent Armstrong. Thank you for that question. We would take any guidance with respect to reopening our facilities and any guidance in terms of the cleaning of our facilities from the Chief Medical Officer and from public health authorities. So certainly I think there would be an expectation that what we would be doing would change. But we would need to wait until we receive the guidance from the ministry with respect to that.
Supplemental?
Yes.
So just for clarification, are you saying that there really hasn't been any at all yet? There hasn't been a conversation, at least in a preliminary kind of way? I ask because I know, for example, we gave away some of our cleaning supplies when frontline workers needed it earlier in the pandemic. Replenishing supplies, getting new things, that the logistics take time. So if we do go back before the end of this school year, what preparations have you spoken about if there's any changes? I would think that the general public would want some sort of message that that they would anticipate something different.
If I could, it's Director Kelly. I would just like to speak to that. With respect to the sharing of supplies, that was something that we, of course, kept enough to be able to handle our own situation. We, unlike some boards, maybe we stock a little bit more, so we were able to share, and of course have protected our own sites with respect to keeping that kind of protective equipment. The ministry does have a working table, and I know Superintendent Hillman is also involved. That there's a number of boards that are starting to begin to plan what it looks like in all aspects of the reopening, which is a huge job. And so, yes, there has been work and discussion on that, and we would certainly always follow the public health advisory, but there are working tables, and our own superintendent is involved in one of those working tables with 4 or 5 other school boards.
Yes, is that good?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's helpful. That's what I want to know, that the discussions are already underway, because it'll be here before we know it, and I want to know the logistics are in time. Thanks.
I just have a follow-up question. The equipment that was turned over, I'm assuming, to the hospitals, what was the quantity of that, and is there any plan to get the equipment back, or was it a donation?
That was a donation, and we shared 55,694 pairs of gloves, 282.5 liters of concentrated disinfectant, and 40 N95 respirators with our local hospitals in the City of Windsor area.
Did you place a value on those?
No, I'll be honest, we did not put a value on those, but I think it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, certainly invaluable. Thank you. Next question is Alicia, Trustee Higginson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Superintendent Armstrong, you had brought up, I think it was during the presentation, about school cash online and some of the that principals are dealing with those issues. This occurred to me while you were saying that, so I appreciate you bringing that up, that there have been field trip cancellations and things like that that are often refunded through checks. And to my understanding, are those checks kind of waiting at the school, and will they, I think they're delivered to the school sites, and I'm wondering if they will be mailed out and released, or how the kind of distribution of, if they're physical checks that are there, how those funds will be distributed back out to the parents and guardians.
Thank you for your question, and I'll start the answer, and then I would encourage Mr. Mayhew to chime in as well. The finance department has been coordinating the refund of anything that's paid through school cash online, because that is a process that we can do centrally. In terms of payment of items that were done to the school, because it was done either by cash or by check, we do require the school's assistance with that. And the finance department has provided instructions to the school in order to process those payments. It could be just simply, it's a matter of workflow, and they are working through that. And those payments should be sent directly from the school and mailed to families. There are some items that are a little bit more complicated in terms of refunding, and we've formed a committee that we will be meeting this week on, that includes representatives from supervisory officers and principals, and we'll work through that so that we can provide additional guidance to the schools so that we can get those items refunded quickly.
Thank you.
If I can add to that quickly. Sorry, it's
Yes,
Sean,
go ahead,
Manager of Finance. Yeah, Shelley pretty much mentioned everything there, but our group continues to be in contact with the schools as well, with the administrators, and we're providing as much support as possible to assist in that process, knowing that the schools are closed. So like Superintendent Armstrong mentioned, trying to process as much as we can centrally, trying to provide a support mechanism for those that may not be able to do it at the school level. So just those are moving along, and we are making decisions.
Just supplemental to that, should parents be contacting the principals in that case? Would that be the best sort of way to go about that if they have questions?
Mr. Mayhew, would you like to address that question, please?
Well, I would think that the parents should be contacting the principals, yeah, if they do have questions. And if that hasn't been addressed already and communicated to principals as to the senior leadership's approach in that matter, I know that there's weekly meetings with principals, and that will be brought up and discussed there. And if it's a school level decision, level decision, that will just be made by the principal.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Yes, Trustee Leclerc.
So I just wanted to note that we have met and surpassed our timed items on the public agenda. So I'd like to make a motion to just continue, or have consent to continue with your current agenda.
Okay, anybody opposed to continuing on?
Consent.
We'll do that by consent. Okay. I don't see any other questions on that item. I would just like to say, before we go on to the next item on the budget, I think sometimes we forget the enormity of this organization. Certainly the presentation tonight by administration tells you how many things they have to keep in order and spend and keep the money coming and going in an accountable way. There's 9 municipalities that we serve. There's 36,000 students, 4,700 employees, annual operating budget of $471 million, operating $79 million annual capital budget. I think Sean mentioned this, 13 collective agreements, 55 elementary schools, 15 high schools, 70 schools. So it's an enormous organization, and I think we do very well at running it. And I think we're the second highest employer in the region. So we'll move on to the next item, and that is presentation of grants for student needs update. Superintendent Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Halberstadt. Unfortunately, this update is going to be brief. Normally at this time, we would have information from the ministry with respect to the grants for student needs. However, at this time, the board has not received any information with respect to the 2020-21 grants for student needs information. And we do not have any information at this time about when we could expect the technical paper. We're under the impression through some conversations we've had with the ministry that there shouldn't be any significant changes to the GSN, the grants for student needs. However, we still do not have an announcement. However, I do want to assure the board that the administration continues to work very hard on moving the budget forward. We have met with all of our superintendents and budget holders on the non-salary expenditures budget, on making certain assumptions, for example, that funding will not change. If it does, then we will make adjustments as necessary. Work has been continuing on the salary related budgets, as well as staffing and enrollment projections. And I do recognize the importance of the budget process and the timelines that are associated with this. And we are committed to providing the board with all the information that you require to support your decision making on the 2020-21 budget. Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Trustee Sipgar, is it?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is on that note then, since we don't have any information from the ministry, and I mentioned this to administration via email this week. At this time, which was a funding update just in regards to what to expect for our budget, which is coming up in June. We don't obviously have such presentation, and things are really different this year as well. So I'm just wondering, what can we expect at our next Ops and Finance Committee meeting, which is coming up at the beginning of June, in terms of some indication of a budget? I know that a lot of our budget lines are predetermined.
You're breaking up, Sarah.
Okay, can you hear me again or no?
Yes.
Okay, I was just making the point that we put out a media release to ask for public input on our budget, but yet don't have any documents or anything out that would indicate what the public can even comment on. So I am just wondering, I do realize it's an odd, the last 2 years have really been anomalies, and I know we discussed that at length, but I'm just wondering what we can expect moving forward for when we do budget.
Superintendent Armstrong, did you catch that?
I did. Thank you for the question. I guess in terms of public consultation, the intention really of the public consultation is not for them to review the budget the way it's been developed or the budget documents, but it's to solicit input from the public on items that administration or trustees should be considering as part of the budget development process. So it's really to provide a voice to the public and to inform administration and guide us in terms of decisions that we are making with respect to the budget. In terms of what to expect in the next Ops and Finance Committee meeting, if we have information with respect to the grants for student needs and we have information from the technical paper, We would certainly share that. It would be our intention that we would share that information with the board, and it doesn't necessarily need to wait till the next Ops and Finance meeting. We do have a board meeting on May the 19th, and if we feel that that's something that we are prepared to do and we have information, that we would prepare a presentation that would take you through those changes. We do understand the challenge that's faced by trustees, and at this time we don't know if any of our timelines are changed, so we are still working off the assumption that we will need to pass a budget for June 30th, but we would certainly try to provide the same level of budget documents with as much advance notice and presentations as we can to help you through the budget process.
Supplementary, Trustee Sipkar.
No, that answered it. Thank you.
Trustee Burgess again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is along the same line, but it's more of a question about whether or not we should advocate for an extension of the budget process. I think of years past, different circumstances, different governments, different funding. And when technical papers and or GSNs, came forward really late in the year, sometimes it meant an enormous amount of stress and unbelievable hours kind of thing for the business department to whip that together to meet this deadline that's enshrined in regulation, right? We have to deliver the budget by a certain deadline, but I'm wondering if it's worthy of us to advocate, or has there been any discussion about extension of the budget deadline? And we've done it before. It's happened before. We've passed budgets in July before, just because I find that the lack of information and the extraordinary stress and the extraordinary burden of learning and sharing the same information that you could do in a face-to-face joint meeting even, it just takes longer. It's harder to do. The level of collegiality just isn't the same. The level of group learning isn't the same. And the public consultation, as far as input goes, is challenging. It's challenging and it's intimidating to a lot of people in the public. So we have yet to have a couple of things ratified. Even if we got the technical paper before the next board meeting, that really doesn't leave a lot of time. So I'm wondering, should we be advocating for an extension of the budget deadline so that we can do it in a thoughtful, less stressful way?
Okay, I'd like to have administration respond to that possibility. I'm assuming if Trustee Burgess wants to put a motion forward, she can do so, but I'd like to hear from administration first on the wisdom of doing that, asking for an extension.
I'm not putting a motion forward. I'm asking a question, Mr. Chair, just to be clear.
Through the chair, it's Director Kelly. That's certainly obviously something that the directors are very concerned about too. So be assured that there is advocacy at the with the ministry on that topic as well, and that is something that will be brought up, and then we continue to ask the ministry when we could get more guidelines on. So I can certainly express at those meetings the fact that our board is very concerned, our trustees are very concerned about that as well. And during these circumstances, they may make extensions just by granting that from the ministry perspective.
Okay, Trustee Burgess, supplementary.
I think that'll actually do. That's what I was looking for, was sometimes before, I'm thinking back again when it happened in July, there was like a wholesale extension to everybody into July. And then there have been individual exceptions as, individual boards couldn't meet the deadline. But I'm looking for like everybody gets it, not just us. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I have another question from Trustee Shin.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure if this is within this funding, but I just want you to pay attention that because of the virus, the character of the virus, it might be a long-term prevention or cautious. We need long-term cautiousness. So I would like to suggest our board to stock more things to protect, like the hand sanitizer. It might be good to provide to every classroom at least one bottle of sanitizer for them to use when we start the school. And if possible, we, make stock of some masks for children, and in case that we need. And also, if possible, we may help the families who need the masks, but they don't have it. So I would like to suggest to make the preparation to order. Because of the difficulty, we may have to order in advance to prepare, and try to do as best as we can to protect the kids when the school come back. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Trustee Halberstam, through you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I appreciate your comments. We would do everything in our power to ensure safety and follow public health guidelines. And again, ordering will be a challenge. It is something we've thought of because everybody's in need. So yes, those will be considerations for us. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I know that the Jeep committee is looking at, they have a bit of a surplus at purchasing masks, so I don't know where that's going, but I know that was brought up. So I guess we'll see as we go along. Any other questions? I don't see them. I just have one question, a budgetary question, and that has to do with international students. And I know that has been a real bonanza for us, and but I've heard some pushback from through the media by international students about coming back next year, or having some of their tuitions waived. So I'm just wondering if we are expecting any decline in international students for the next school year.
It's Director Kelly. I would think that, that is something we're going to have to look at, given the thing. This is a global pandemic. It may be something that we do see as a challenge for us. We don't know the outcome of that, but I think it's realistic to assume that students will not be wanting to do as much exchange. We will continue to support students where we can and continue that. But it's, to be realistic, I think that will be a challenge for us in the upcoming year.
Okay, thank you. Also, and I had mentioned this to the director about the possibilities of layoffs in our staff with this budget coming through, and maybe I'd ask the director to comment on that.
When you referred to budget, of course, we're funded based on ministry funding, based on the number of students we have. So it will depend completely on the number of students we have and what that GSN looks like. And so we don't know what that is, although I don't expect a major difference. But if our enrollment is affected by it, then of course there could be the possibility of layoffs. Every year we do, I think, a pretty good job of projecting and planning. This year makes it a little more difficult. There's certainly no big plans to do anything. We just have to look at our enrollments. And again, those are just coming in now. We're starting to work on those.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on now. We don't have any delegations. Speakers list, I assume we don't have any of those. New business? Any new business? No. Reports? No reports. Trustee question period. We've had a lot of them. Any more? Notices of motion? None.
Sorry, Trustee Halberstam, I had one quick question.
I had a
Yeah.
question too.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know I heard Mrs. Hinchcliffe mention it, but I just wanted to reiterate with the provincial guidelines reopening the economy this week, I believe construction on our properties has started back up. So I know that there was a brief pause, but I just wanted to confirm that all of the construction projects that we had going on are slated to continue starting this week with that information.
Superintendent Armstrong?
Thank you. That is correct. Effective May 4th, the ministry or the province has indicated that school and childcare center construction is permitted to resume. There are very strict safety guidelines, however, that need to be followed. And the board is working with its contractors to ensure that all safety protocols are in place and are established prior to any work resuming.
Supplementary?
No, sorry.
Okay, we have another late question. Trustee Burgess?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering, operationally, we do our staffing generally in May because by then we've had our, kindergarten registration, we've had, day in the life, all of those activities, some of which got truncated and looked different. By now, we've had our kids who are in grade 8 had opportunity for welcoming opportunities at their receiving high school. Some of those have gone by the wayside. We don't know if they're going to happen at all. What are we doing for those transition pieces during the pandemic? So kindergarten registration, is it happening? Are we getting anything? Are we just anticipating increasingly more in the last few years, it'll just happen when it happens closer to the reopening of school? Or grade 9 selections, what are we doing to support those kids going from 8 to 9? And OSSLT, I don't think it happened, did it, this year? So I'm wondering, what provisions are we making for those?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
it's Director Kelly. I can answer a couple of those questions. With respect to the kindergarten registration, we actually took a different way to deal with the kindergarten registration this year, where schools made videos, and it went over very well. So while the particular ways that we had been doing things weren't the same, they did draw students. And so we may get more students in the August period or something like that, but we were able to garner some new students and are pleased with how the kindergarten registration went despite it. People were very creative, so I was very pleased with that. Similarly, in the grade 8 to 9 transition, I know, for example, with students with special needs, those transition meetings did occur, so that those students that are in risk, for example, another group, those kinds of conversations have occurred. The course selections have all been put in through My Blueprint. Will some kids not have registered like we wanted them to? Yes, perhaps, but we're proceeding with staffing process as per timelines and good cooperation with our unions. And we are moving forward. Superintendent Mills and Superintendent Houston are proceeding.
Supplementary?
So I saw some of those videos. They were great. Again, that's people who are engaged online in social media that are accessing those videos. So it had an audience, and I'm glad that it was well received. But can you compare through every last May the 5th, whether or not our numbers or the engagement of community community members committing to high school registration and kindergarten registration are late or are down? Do we need to do anything additionally?
Again, through you,
Yes, go ahead.
A couple things I can add, and maybe others would like to chirp in here. We do compare numbers each year. We do look at particular schools and where enrollments, what they typically were in the past. We look at the demographic data. Superintendent Allwender, Superintendent Howitt look at things like that to prepare. Is there another opportunity to do a blitz for registration? Yes, that's something to consider. But yeah, we do look at all of that data. We do.
Okay, anything else? I think I mentioned notices of motion, there was none. So we're now into announcements. Any of those? Silence, okay, we're adjournment. Moved by Trustee Burgess and Trustee Cook. All in favor? Nobody's not in favor. Adjournment. Convene into the public meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Halberstadt. We're back in the public session now, and we're at item E, declaration of conflict of interest. Is there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to item F, which is actions of the board meeting from private session. I do not believe there's any actions from the private session. Item G, which will be approval of the minutes, G1. Trustee Cook and Trustee Higgison moved and seconded. All in support?
Support.
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 Anyone opposed? It's carried. Business arising from the minutes. Any business arising from the minutes? Recommendations from the standing committees. I do not believe there's any recommendations from the standing committee. Correct me if I'm wrong. Notices of motion. No notices of motion. We're adjourned. Have a good night.
Good night, all. Thank you for your cooperation.
Good night. Thank you.